Council starts today. Well, good morning, everybody. My name's Gene Colters. I'm presiding member for today's meeting. Open the meeting at 9:34 a.m. And in doing so, I acknowledge we are hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respect to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters and community. This meeting will be run in accordance with DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the Planning and Development Act, Development Assessment Panels Regulations 2011. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of the Planning and Development Assessment Panels Regulations 2011, and members are reminded to announce their name and title prior to speaking. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. I'll introduce the panel members today. As I said, my name's Gene Colters, presiding member. To my left is Francesca Lafanti, deputy presiding member, and Dale Page, specialist member as well. We're joined by Councillor Daniel Lim, who's on screen, and Councillor Glenys Barber, who's sitting on the left. I have apologies from Councillor Matthew Woodall and Councillor Scott Green from the City of Melville. There are no members on leave of absence, and note minutes of previous meetings are available on the DAP website. Part B of the agenda. First of all, I'll ask declaration of due consideration. Can panel members confirm they have duly considered all of the documentation contained within Part B of the agenda and Part B related information, and also the R13 direction response that's published on 8th of April? Can you do so by raising your hand, please? Thank you. That's unanimous. Item 2 on Part B is declaration of interest. We have a declaration of interest, an impartiality interest from Councillor Lim. He participated in prior council meeting and his approval to sit and vote at this meeting was approved by the DAP Executive Director.
I'm probably in the same boat as Lim on that one.
Okay, all right. Well, in that case, you've considered the item at the council meeting. The local government member, you acknowledge that in accordance with section 249 of the DAP Code of Conduct, you declared that you participated in the council meeting. Under section 212 of the regs, the members acknowledge they're not bound by any previous decision or resolution of the local government, and you undertake to exercise independent judgment in relation to the matter before you. Is that correct? In that case, I've considered that and determined that there are no impartiality interests that would prevent you from participating or voting in relation to the DAP application at this meeting. Okay. The item we are here to consider today, of course, is the item 3.1 at lot 585. Number 3 Bragle Place, and lot 274, number 17, and 275, number 19, Armorby Road, Ardross. There have been a number of submissions lodged, and firstly, there's a number of written submissions. I won't go through all those. They have all been received, logged, and acknowledged, and members have had the opportunity to read all of those. We do have presenters here today in support or against the recommendation, and we will start off by calling Karen.
Peter first.
Peter Rourke first. Okay. May I remind you that you have 3 minutes to make the presentation. If they're long presentations, speak to the item rather than read it all, because we have all seen. Thank you.
Do you bring up the first one? Good morning. My name is Peter Rourke. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you concerning this development. You see before you the design statement that endeavours to negotiate a middle ground and respect existing locale. So does it really achieve this? The answer is no, it does not. In particular, the yellow represents just how far it exceeds what's actually permitted, with 7 stories proposed, not the permitted 4 shown in green. Does not provide appropriate transition to residential areas, has loss of privacy and bulk impacts. Schools, traffic, children and safety. Does this look like a normal street to you? Braghall is the sole direct route to the schools. We don't believe the test accounts for reality on the ground. For example, you can clearly see how students walk in the road itself, with the footpath having insufficient capacity and providing ineffective in terms of the proposed safety claimed in the TIS. These aren't normal streets and are at saturation morning and afternoon every school day. Their high sensitivity means introduction more traffic from this development will make the situation worse. In summary, the built form, bulk and scale are not considered to respond well to the future or existing character of the locale, not considered to suitably mitigate the considerable discretion to the height controls. It's inconsistent with the MCC, ESP and R codes. There's errors in the traffic impact statement, and also a grossly exaggerated community benefit, like factor of 8. Respect the locale, respect the frame precinct, 4 stories, and use the existing Aldenbury roundabout for access. Honour the established social contract, support refusal. At 4 stories, the frame precinct will do its fair share of the heavy lifting required by the state government. In conclusion, this proposal fails to negotiate a middle ground. It doesn't respect the existing locale or respond in an appropriate and proportionate way to the future. Would ask you, the members of the JDAP, to honour the established social contract already formed by the endorsed frame precinct. Please support refusal.
Thank you very much. Panel members, do you have any questions of the presenter? Yes, Dale.
Just one. Thank you, Mr. Rourke. So you've raised in your submission a concern about potential interface issues with students, especially on rubbish collection days. So if these issues were to occur, would they not occur anyway, even if the development was of a compliant height? Or are you of the view that the access shouldn't be taken off Braghall Place? Is that, which are you?
I see 2 aspects to that. Obviously, the more floors in the building, the more units, therefore the more traffic. In Aldenbury, there's a roundabout with 3 arms in it. I believe the developer's argument is they don't own the property beside it. Prior to retirement, I was a consulting engineer, and this submission just is so obvious that it's using, to me, it lacks credibility that they couldn't own that property. And then with access to Aldenbury, that issue at Braggle Place is mitigated. Because the photograph there that showed Braggle, that happens every school day. And even in the morning, there's clusters of students making the way through Garden Centre. And because they would have to go along Risley or down Links, they can just do a shortcut through Braggle and through the Oval to both the high school and the primary school.
You've answered my question.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? If not, thank you, Mr. Rook. Next presenter is Karen Rook.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Karen Rourke, and my submission supports the 40-odd local residents that oppose the gross overall size of the development and supports the Melville City Council's complete rejection of the proposed development. First of all, the building height, the excessive building height. Now, if I just quickly go back to here and then go back again, of the 8 current multi-storey buildings around the sides of Westfield Garden City that have been built on the original 1 or 2 single blocks of land, 7 are 4 stories and 1 is 5 stories in height. The 5-storey Aurora on Risley has 4 stories of residential apartments over a ground floor of commercial offices. The pictures at the bottom of the diagram are representative of the buildings on 3 sides of the Westfield Garden City, and there are more pictures in Appendix 1, which I hope to have time to get to. My summary for this, a 7-storey building of 29 metres in height is completely out of character for the zoning of the 14 metres in height, hence is not acceptable in terms of the social contract with the current residents in the local area. I have a second issue. I believe the west side proposed of the development is very misleading. Now, the west side of the proposed shows 5 stories of parapet wall, and according to the plans has windows facing west. If you have a look at the red rectangles, it shows windows facing west. However, the detailed plans of the actual units have no windows facing west. This indicates that the future development of the blocks of land that are already owned by the developer are possibly to be even higher. Now, coming back to the west side, you can see the 2 sets of units. The unit walls have no windows to the west. There is, however, a light shaft right in the middle. I believe that light shaft is to allow light into the unit passageway, regardless of what is built on the adjacent building. Now, I also think there's been a drafting error because it's got that light window into a unit cupboard. I don't think it's supposed to go into the cupboard. I think it's supposed to go into the passageway. I think it's just a drafting error. But at best, that is 1 window into a passage. It is not into the units. Therefore, in summary, I believe the diagram to be misleading and makes one suspect the integrity and the intentions of the developer. Now, if I go just to, now, Appendix 1. Sorry, one too many. This is Risley Street, one of the 4-storey buildings. It has 10 apartments and 3 offices. And I'll make an extra note there that Risley Street has got 4 lanes with a median strip. Marmion Street on the other side has also got 4 lanes with a medium strip.
Can you summarise now, please, Mr. Rock?
Okay,
3 minutes.
I'll just go back one. sorry, wrong way. There. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Mayor, I'll just ask any panel members, do you have any questions of Mr. Rourke? No? No? Okay, thank you. Sorry.
I'll ask a question. Why are you concerned about the potential building on the western side, Mrs. Rourke?
I have suspicion that if it's 5 stories of parapet wall and no actual windows, I believe that if they can get away with 7 stories now, the next lot will be 10. And they also own 2 more further down, and there'll be 12.
Who owns 2 more further down?
Same owners. No, I know I can't speak for what, I can only speak to what is there at the moment. But 5 stories of parapet wall is not, as far as I'm concerned, looking good for what's going to go next.
Can I just,
Certainly.
can I just ask a question? On that plan you show the light well,
Yes.
there are 3 windows.
Yes, into the light well.
Yes, and they're,
East and west.
well, no, that's right. That's fine. Okay, so but there are windows there
Yes.
to allow light in.
You could put a huge monstrosity, even bigger, next door and still get light in from the top.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Okay, the next presenter, Martin Lavery and Dr. Lorna McCourt. I don't know how you're doing that.
Good morning.
3 minutes, thank you.
My name's Dr. Lorna McCourt. I'm Martin Lavery. I live in 1D Bragger Place, which is adjacent to the proposed building. And the highlight is that the proposal of building 7 stories using the access in through Bragger Place would increase the traffic flow drastically. The egress and access to it only goes past the school. The school is in the morning and afternoon. Massive amount of traffic and at the times. There's 2,000 students still at the high school. I'm not sure the actual numbers for the primary schools. We're talking over 2,000 students who access that area. Sorry. The number of car parking spaces that have developed with the proposal, insufficient actual rooms in the building. And we already have limited parking around the area itself. Sorry, too quick. So that's across high school. The primary school is to the top of the photograph. That is literally, the proposal is just where the big dot is. So that's the proposed development. As you can see, it takes up almost half of that entire street. The access is no more than 15 meters away from our house. If I go back one, you can literally see Leverberg Street is the only point where Bragger Place exits out, and that's right on the corner of the school where we have morning and afternoon drop off and pickups. And the traffic there during those times is absolutely chocker block. And as you've already seen in the previous presentation, it wouldn't matter how wide the footpath is in Bragger Place, the school kids are going to use the road just purely simply because of the volume that they do. They actually have a teacher, if I could forward one, actually stops the traffic just at the place. They allow groups of students to go through, and therefore that would be a little bit more complicated with the possibility of using, there was only one car per unit, that's 60 cars. planning scheme has a restriction of 4 stories and 7-story roof over that. And I feel that if that's allowed using the R codes for Almondsbury Road, the access in through us, then that would negate the council's ability to plan for local.
Okay, your 3 minutes are up. If you could please summarise. Thank you.
The issue that we have with the proposal is it's grossly overwhelming on aesthetics. Streetscape will be destroyed. The access and parking issues will be exaggerated further, and therefore there is no benefit to the community who currently live there. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Panel members, are there any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Francesca Lefanti. I have a couple of questions, specifically in relation to the concerns you raised about safety.
Yeah.
The material that we have provided, the material that the submissions have provided, talks and shows a lot of photographs regarding school children. I'm interested in your comments about those periods of time. Generally, schools, from my observation, intensive period of time, particularly at end of school when they all finish at the same point and then they all leave. So I'm interested as a local resident, from a local resident's perspective, the time frames that that intensity occurs. That's my first part of my question. And the second part of my question is typical movement in the street. And I'll qualify that in saying that many residential properties have different movement times to student peak period. So I'm interested in your comment on both of those in the context of the student safety issues. That's my, sorry, quite a long question to get to.
All right. If we start from the morning period, we get students walking down through the road from anywhere from 7:15 up until school starts. And that is a much lighter load, but they tend not to use the footpath. It's a quiet street, so they can play the basketball, they carry the bits and pieces. The real bottleneck comes in, as you say, is that the home time where they all finish at the same time. Primary school, high school, moms and dads will come and pick them up. The traffic actually gets completely chock-a-block around that entire area because, like you can see, it's basically just a square. And what happens is, they say earlier, is that a teacher actually has to physically stop the traffic to allow them to cross Almondsbury Road to get into Braggart Place, because what they do is they go up Braggart Place, use the pedestrian crossing, and go in and exit out through Garden City itself. So they use Garden City as almost as a collection point for them to disperse further. So I think that's the problem. It increases the risk of conflict between people who may not necessarily be totally aware of their own safety requirements. Other people get frustrated because the traffic gets so heavy that trying to get in and out of our actual street at that period of time can be quite challenging.
And that period of time, particularly afternoon period, with students leaving, what's a time frame you would say as a local resident that high congestion? And I note from the information we've got, and obviously on site, the congestion predominantly, my observation and material, happens from, is it parents of school children? That's the observation that I have.
Yeah.
So what's that time period of impact that you're experiencing?
I think the speed limit restriction comes in from 2:30, and you normally then get parents who come in early, park up, as you've seen on previous photographs, and therefore then block the street. But you're looking probably at a good 40 minutes of that peak period, where there are hundreds of students moving around, not just on Almondsbury Road, but in the adjacent streets as well. That that's an exit point. But the vast majority of pedestrian traffic comes up through Bragg, say has to cross Almondbury Road, which is the only point of egress from Bragg Place. There's no other way around it.
And out of those two periods, the morning peak and particularly the afternoon peak, what is your experience, I should say, of the student movement beyond those periods, so later in the day, weekends, those sorts of things?
It's much later. And again, it's more of a dribs and drab sort of erratic nature. It doesn't have that same volume that you've seen in the in one of the photographs. But what it does have is, again, students wandering up through the actual roadway itself. Our neighbour had to stop putting plants because they also walk in the gardens, and they don't walk on the footpath because why would you do that? Because we've all been there. We're all students, and it's just they wander along chatting to one another. They've got little or no concern about what's going around them. And number of times that we've had to try and just sort of sit reversing out of our driveway and just let them wander by and wait for a big enough gap to walk out. But I think, as I say, outside of that peak period at home time, it still carries on probably for another 30 minutes with just people slowly meandering home.
If there's any events on at the school.
Sorry,
If there's any events on at school as well, there's significant impact. Because parents coming to the school and parking around the area. So you might not get the students walking through, but the parking around the area is impacted.
thank you.
That's my
Can I just-
Yes, councillor.
Lavery, so what's your main concern? Is it the foot traffic on Bray Gore and consequential potential extra cars on Bray Gore, or is it the height?
So it's both.
So would you consider, if the development was changed to have an exit onto Almondbury, would that make it better? Or, so I'm trying to work out, is it the traffic or the height that's your main
It's
concern?
actually both. The aesthetics of the building as it stands, as it's proposed, overwhelm the entire area because everything else apart from the 4-story building on the top left of the street is all 2-story max. So to have a building that basically takes up 1/2 of that side of the street would aesthetically be detrimental to the overall to the area. The issue with traffic coming in through Bragg is the increased flow and therefore the risk for all the pedestrian area that it actually turns into be. Whether it went on the Almondsbury Road or not, the height itself doesn't change. The aesthetics that the proposed building has, because it seems to have a dark facade, literally take away from that entire area. So that's really it. 4-story building, and the access was in there. I'd still be concerned about the traffic flow, but it's not. It's 60 units. There's one exit, which will only go in through Bragg Place because Almondbury Road was roofed out for by them. And again, so it's both those things that are concerning, is that if the local rules aren't necessarily have to be followed, then what's next? And this isn't about any future building issues. This is about what's proposed now, and 7 stories in that area at this time on that site with everything coming through Bragg Place means that aesthetically it's unpleasant to look at. It doesn't do anything for the area. It doesn't benefit any of their current residents or even future residents. And they also then have to deal with the increased traffic.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lavery.
Thank you very much for your time, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Next presenter, Mr. Rob Cox.
Thanks very much for making time for me. My name is Rod Cox. I part of the 40 members of the Bragor residents group who support the City of Melville's rejection of this proposed development in its current form. I live on the corner of Leverberg and Bragor, so I'm fully aware of some of those questions you will have. My focus on this presentation is part, obviously, the Bragor residents group object and support the council in knocking back this development on doesn't meet the requirements of the zoning on size, height, and also my focus is on traffic flow, safety, and quality of life of the residents. The Bragor residents group, the majority, by the way, the majority of us, the 40 of us, are downsizers. The majority of us are in the major land in Ardros is large properties. We are infill. We're infill with 3 and 4 houses on each original block. So we're downsizers, and we infill in large Ardros blocks. And our estimated value of our 40 residents is $60 million of our property. So our group's serious concerns regarding this proposed development, principally the concern of the safety of the residents and students from Apricot Senior High School, increased road congestion and excessive height and size of the development. We are not NIMBYs. We accept that the unit commercial development will occur along Ardenbury Road, as it is a major 2-lane arterial road with crosswalks, traffic lights, and is opposite the Westfield Shopping Centre. However, this proposed R100 zone multi-storey development in Ardenbury Road should not have an unexpected flow-on impact and further erode our residents' quality of life in the local surrounding 30 and 40 kilometres safety school zone, single-lane residential streets of Ardros. That's a photo of overview of Bragor Street. You'll notice that I'm on number 20, which is the corner of Leverberg and Bragor, and the first 4 houses was 1 block of land, and then this development's taking up half the street on my side of the street. Across the road is Shahar's council-approved 4-storey, which has 17 apartments on Ardenbury Road. The affected area for you, the Leverberg Street, Bragor, and Links Road, Apricot High School. This photo was taken about 3 years ago. You notice in the top left-hand corner of the high school, there are 3 transportables. That was taken 3 years ago. 10 were put in last year, and as of Christmas, there are now 17 transportables at Apricot High School with a total population in excess of 2,000 students. Those students...
Fox, your 3 minutes are up, so if you could speak to wind up, thank you.
All of those students, 50-60% of those students come across the Oval and cross Ardenbury and go up Bragor. This is the development in Bragor. There are 92 bays, 6 visitors bays, 7 motorbike bays, and 6 for the 3-storey houses. 113 vehicles will be in that building, and the development is to progress down Bragor instead of Ardenbury. I'll just flick through to the finish. That's the students going up the street photo I've taken with an overlay of what the building would look like, which is totally inappropriate. That's the students in front of my house on a daily basis for half an hour in the afternoon. To give you an idea of the 500 to 600 students in the afternoon come across the front there. I see it every day. Not today because it's school holidays.
Thank you, Mr. Cox.
Thank you. I just want to finish with that one there, which is those cars are there all day long. They are year 11 and year 12 students, P-platers parking there all day, every day. And when people come to school and go home, Arbenbury Road is totally solid of cars from Links Road to Risley Street.
Thank you, Cox.
Any
Okay.
questions? Thanks very much.
Questions of Mr. Cox? Yes, Dale?
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Reading your submission and listening to you today, to me, there is a sense that there is a concern about the density in this location. Can I just check that with you? If we were dealing today with a development that was compliant with the structure plan height provisions, would your concerns remain?
My concerns, obviously as a group, we're concerned about the gross size. It doesn't meet the council requirements on size. It's double the size. And it's an overstatement. But my focus is obviously that it's inappropriate to have 113 car bays going down a quiet cul-de-sac into Leverberg Street, which is a 40-kilometre-hour zone, which is totally packed with students and things. And then if those 57 units, if they want to go to Leach Highway or the freeway, by coming out this proposed development, they would come out to Bragor, turn left into the school zone of Arbenbury, left into Links Road, which is 24 hours a day, 30-kilometre school zone, left into Arbenbury and drive straight past the front of their building. Get to right-hand, turn right at the lights at Risley Street to go down to the freeway or Leach Highway. Arbenbury Road is obviously a dual carriageway with crosswalks and traffic lights, and that's where the traffic should flow. It should not have an impact on us. And as you see, the yellow one there is, we believe that developers will own they own two of those, will own the third one. And the design is that those buildings will also go to the back through that driveway and go down Bragor, which would possibly have 300 cars going down.
Thank you, Mr. Cox.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, thank you, Mr. Cox. Our next presenter is online. Shaya Gordy. I hope I pronounced that correct.
Yeah. Yes, good morning.
Okay, you have 3 minutes.
Yes. Just share my screen with you. Okay. Okay, my name is Shaya Gorji. Good morning. I'm from 8 Bragor Place, Ardross, that block of apartment that is across the road from the proposed development. I'll just go to the next one. Yep. So, okay. This building, as you can see, just minimize this. As you can see, the building this is the building that I have built a few years ago under the same zoning and the R codes as this building. This is 12 meters high, 4 stories. This is 26.8 meters high, 8 stories. And this building that I built is fully compliant, and council was adamant that I do it this way, within a millimeter of the council allowing me to do it. And as to provide a transition to R40 from Almondbury Road down to Bragor R40. This one just got total disregard for anything. There's very little transition there. Next one. Next, let me just get the next one. Okay, then we're talking about the topic of this car parking that others have touched on. What I want to add to what Karen and others said, that this is about 100 car parking bay, give or take, somewhere between 99 and 113 cars in here. this the side in here has got no windows. So obviously these are all development sites. They're all going to get, this is going to be developed at one point. And what's happening, the way this has been designed is that this bit of an internal road can continue on and provide access to all the car parking there. So everything is going to be dumped into Bragg Place, just to keep the traffic away from Almondbury Road. I don't know what it is. What's happening is that then that will put us in this situation that others have shown. 300 over cars going to come through this little gap in here. With high school is expanding as well. And then more people are going to be walking through this thing. This is not a footpath issue. This is just the whole thing is a footpath. And the traffic report that has been provided is just so flawed that they haven't even consulted the high school. I cannot believe that such a report gets accepted by anyone. There's no reference to any of these things. Access can easily be provided from Almondbury Road. This is all owned by the same developer. They can do it. It comes up here. I've checked it with the traffic engineers of the council, and it's safe. They've confirmed that this is safe. So I don't understand why this has to come from Bragg Place. Make it so unsafe. Not only for Bragg Place, all the roads around it as well. It's just so unbelievably flawed traffic report. And I'm a developer. I've been a developer for 40 years. This is just totally this is ridiculous. They can bring it down here, to rearrange the entrance to the car park and come from the front to go into an undercroft situation. They're not going to lose any space if they do it from the front.
Your 3 minutes are up now, Mr.
Yes, that's right. And also,
Summarise.
Yes. Sorry. Yes, I'm just nearly finished. This is basically they could provide something at the front in here. I'm sure the residents would approve it. But what is happening in here is that the DAP, the decision-making for powers with the DAP is constrained by the existing planning framework for the local government area. And then just the last meeting that the council had, they said that clearly is non-compliant with the local planning framework, and they recommend refusal. And that brings me to my conclusion that this is really against the law. If you go there against the existing planning framework of the council, and it get disapproved, it's just breaking the law basically. That's it. And thank you. I respectfully urge that the panel to refuse the STAP application in the current form. They can change it, but in the current format. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any panel members wish to ask questions of Mr. Kauriti? Yes, Dale?
I have two questions, if you don't mind. How long ago was your development approved by council?
6 years ago.
And you've made a comment towards the back end of your presentation, and you expanded on it a little bit in your submission. You've stated that this panel's decision-making powers are constrained by the existing planning framework for the local government area, the subject of the application. And I understand what you mean by that.
That's right, yes.
But you as a developer, are you aware that the planning framework inherently enables discretion to be exercised by the planning decision maker?
This was very new to me, because when I was doing my building, within the millimeter, I was watched. I couldn't have a millimeter extra. I couldn't be slightly cheeky. I couldn't do anything. And it was all, that's how I built that building. If you look at the back of the building, it steps in the funny ways, angles and all of that. These are all the setbacks, all the requirements of the council to provide that transition properly and professionally. There is a transition requirement as well. That transition has been totally disregarded. And council is aware of that. Unanimously, council has rejected this because of that lack of transition. And that is discretion of the council. The council itself said it doesn't want to have that discretion unless somebody else wants to do that discretion.
Thank you. You've answered my question.
Thank you. Any further questions of panel members?
Councillor Lim has
Councillor Lim, yes.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Just a question for you, Shaya. So 6 years ago, did you yourself consult with the Applecross school or the Ardross Primary School? And I'm just trying to, I'm curious about what their concerns were when you consulted with them. Thank you.
Oh, yes, well, this time around, this time around.
So this time around, they didn't consult Applecross, but I believe 6 years ago you may have.
No, this is because my building is a lot smaller than this, and the impact was a lot less. And even that there was quite an uprising from the local residents, who are now my good friends. But it wasn't like this one that potentially could have up to 300 cars coming from that thing through the student access way, basically. And we asked the high school, and they said no, they haven't been consulted at all.
Okay, so yeah, if I can clarify, so I guess your development was a much smaller, 4 stories. So you didn't, I guess you just consulted the neighboring areas and you didn't consult the school. Is that correct?
No, I didn't consult the
Okay.
school. No.
Oh, thank you.
But mine wasn't 300 cars.
Thank you very much.
Correct.
Are there any other questions?
Noted for that. Thank you for that.
Any other questions of Mr. Gordy?
No.
If not, thank you for your submission. The next presenter is Mr. Ken Perry. Welcome, Mr. Perry.
Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. I was taken by Dale's comment that this was a non-compliant design. Yeah, and the council doesn't like it. And the Melville City planners don't like it. And the last presenter developed a compliant design, and no one is talking about the group housing because it's compliant. This is a non-compliant design. This decision today is essentially giving an instant rezoning of this property from R100, 4 stories, plot ratio up to 1.3, to RAC2, 7 stories, 2.5 plot ratio. So you've got almost a doubling in height and a doubling in plot ratio. These things are worth huge amounts of money. And that's why rezoning needs to go through the proper planning process, which the City of Melville has started already, seeing that this is coming up to 10 years old. But in their considerations of this proposal, I have no doubt that the planners, in their decision in the RAR, and the council in their decision and their recommendation, have a view about what they think should happen. And you, as decision makers, should not lightly disregard the impact of that. They are the proper authority to carry out a planning rezoning of this, not 3 government-appointed members and 2 council members, both of which get paid $425 to review 1,000 pages in this particular presentation, and are prevented from discussing it between themselves by the regulations. It is not clear what rules and payments apply to the experts who've been appointed by the government. That information has been withheld from me, even though it will be published in the annual report. There are funny things going on here, and I don't like it. The value of this non-compliance is a development bonus. It's an enormous amount of money, and it comes from the loss of property rights with the community. Section 2.8, you're to be congratulated. The proposers and the RAR both go to section 2.8 of volume 7.3 of the R codes, which clearly sets out that the principle is, yes, you can have development bonuses, but they must be offset by increased community benefits. Now, if a compliant building doesn't have any bonuses, there will be certain benefits that flow from any development to the community. How am I going for time?
You've got about a minute and a half to go.
Oh, that's bloody good. I'm only half started. So what happens is that you need to value in the hands of the developer the value of the extra height and extra density. This has been done at Airlie Street with Blackburn, where $8 million was assessed for the height value only, the extra height. They went from an approved 8 stories to 17 stories. And the council and the developer agreed that that was worth $8 million to the developer. They also agreed that the provision of a perpetual park at that site for the benefit of the community would also be worth, in the hands of the community, around about $8 million. Now, the developer could have sold that for $20 million or more. That's the value of the property in the area. So developments, bonuses, you get plot ratio, that's worth a lot of money, and you get height, and that's worth a lot of money. Those two things need to be added. The Department of Planning has got it wrong, and I have been unable to convince them to correct it. And if you went through my long presentation, my long submission, I apologise for that, but there are many, many aspects on this, and they need to be covered. You need to understand that it is so wrong that councils are being squeezed out of the decision-making process when, in fact, they're central to the preservation of individual property rights. Ad hoc decisions.
Minutes are up.
Thank you. I'm just about to finish. Ad hoc decisions. Ad hoc decisions strip people of their property rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Have any questions of the presenter? Yes.
Thank you. I have a question. Thank you for your presentation. I have a question in relation to your presentation and your comments today. Your presentation provides information, a calculation, and your numbers in there in terms of calculating community benefit. The question goes to community benefit. I've got the copy of the R codes, and you spoke a little bit to those. The planning framework doesn't attribute a dollar value. It talks about other elements to it. You also made a comment about your concerns within the planning framework that you've attempted to address. Can you speak a little bit further about your commentary of a percentage dollar value for which the framework doesn't calculate that, doesn't calculate benefit in the same manner?
If we take an example of the Chellingworth site that you would be very familiar with, the Chellingworth site had a plot ratio for RAC 3, I think it was, or 1, no, RAC 1, sorry, and of 3. And the Chellingworth proposal, which was a set of 3 huge apartment towers up to 24 stories on Stirling Highway. So that had an inherent plot ratio of around about 5.5, which is an 85% increase in the plot ratio. When I started on this whole journey, I struggled for a bit to understand what the value of that was, and then the penny dropped that, in fact, if they had have bought 85% more land, there would not have been a plot ratio bonus. The Blackburn site has no plot ratio in Airlie Street, has no plot ratio bonus, right? Has a height bonus and not a plot ratio bonus. So all I did is I take the $20 million that the developer paid for the site at Chellingworth and apply 85% to that. That's $17 million as an inherent value, and that's a minimum because that land doesn't exist. So that's a minimum 17 million. And then you've got height. Well, Nedlands was extremely fortunate to be instructed by the department to remove height limits along Stirling Highway, Nedlands, and Nedlands only. One of the more outrageous decisions I have ever been alerted to. That immediately gave away height bonuses, $8 million just down the road in Claremont, to every developer. Now, it is possible to do, as they've done at Blackburn in Early Street, it is possible to do a microeconomic analysis of the benefits to the community and to the benefits to the developer of these incremental community benefits, and they're the incremental benefits over and above the minimum that would have occurred if a compliant design. It's only the incremental stuff. So when we're talking about, one of the community benefits is saving the trees, well, hang on, a compliant building would save the trees. So there's no incremental benefit. And it's shoddy microeconomic analysis by both the council and the proposers that needs to be unravelled. You need to get expert advice on this. I've thought about it for 5 years, almost 5 years. And I have developed some expertise and understanding of this. And also, these things are instant rezonings, worth a fortune, which is why developers want them.
Questions from
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Perry. We have our next presenter, Stephen Dwyer, J Architects. And I presume, okay, Paul Nguyen from Shawmac and Chris Noble from Urbis. Combined 10 minutes for the presentation. Don't know who wishes to start or how you break it up, if you're going to light, please.
I'm starting, thank you. Darren Evans from Centre Group. I'll give a brief introduction before Chris and Jimmy will run.
Sorry, Darren.
Darren Evans. I'll give a brief introduction before Chris and Jimmy will run through the architecture, and Chris Nolan will cover planning. We also have Paul, Rebecca, and I believe Andrew's online, available for any questions. Centre Group is Australia's largest retail centre owner with in-house design, development and construction. We own 4 strategically located centres in WA, spanning over 70 hectares and connected to public transport. Residential at Burragoon and the retail development at Burragoon are our WA priority projects. We are long-term asset owners, committed to the high-quality outcomes on our centre and also around our centres. Our centres are places where people choose to visit every day, increasingly places they are choosing to live. We are working with the state and local authorities on our WA residential densification project, which will see ultimately thousands of houses developed on our assets. This proposal is the first step in our residential strategy for WA and will serve as a pilot for our future projects. I'll now hand over to Jimmy and the balance of the team.
Jim Thompson speaking in support of item. Our proposal has been on a 2-year collaboration with the city, their design review panel and adjacent landowners. It represents a considered response to the complexities of urban infill. The area is undergoing change and a future context quite different to today. Our brief was to create a case study for development of the frame, one that could incorporate and exceed the requirements of the Our Codes Volume 2, and one that would help incentivise amalgamation of lots and their development. These efforts have been clearly recognised and supported by the city's design review panel, who refer to this proposal as representing exemplary design in its approach. This is a precinct of significant existing and evolving amenity, both commercial, landscape, community and residential, and one very suited to higher density. We have to go through this process of creating really good examples of infill so that we can incentivise amalgamation of lots and development of quality residential homes.
That's me. In terms of the key planning considerations, we've heard a lot today around the Melville City Centre structure plan, and then related to that is Volume 2 of the Our Codes.
Sorry, just so others are aware,
Sorry, Chris Nolan from Urbis. Apologies.
That, Chris, but people are watching that.
Yeah, not a problem.
You are.
Yep, all good. So two key documents being RCodes and Melville City Centre Structure Plan. The structure plan was prepared in 2012 and 2013 and adopted in 2014. It was obviously prepared pre-Design WA, which put greater emphasis on performance-based design and planning. The Melville City Centre Structure Plan is an outdated planning framework that hasn't been updated to accommodate or factor in volume 2 of the RCodes, and was also released prior to the regulations of that. So it becomes very much a due regard document, an older due regard document, which I think is really important. Interestingly, the structure plan removes assessment against the RCodes in relation to site coverage, plot ratio, open space requirements, and building height, which is probably the key thing we're talking about here today. The structure plan takes a tiered approach, what I call the wedding cake approach to structure planning, tiering down, in this instance, from 16 to 12 down to 2 stories. Ideally, this is around protecting overlooking and overshadowing. And this presentation today is about an alternative approach, an approach that responds to volume 2 of the RCodes, that exceeds volume 2 of the RCodes. And we believe there's discretion there to accommodate that. Oh, sorry, one more slide. Just in terms of future site context, really important again. Feb 2023, Centre Group got what will almost be $1 billion redevelopment of the Westfield Burgoon Shopping Centre approved. 110,000 square metres of retail floor space, new high street, new food and bev, medical, everything. Probably the key difference from when AMP prepared the original structure plan and today is Almondbury and that other side of Almondbury, and that image there demonstrates that. The structure plan assumes a presentable form, but not necessarily an active form. And that entrance there is one of the key entrances into the redeveloped shopping centre. Pedestrian crossing there, entering into a future food and bev precinct. I think that's really important from a context perspective, considering this application across the road. I'll hand over now to Chris.
Thank you. Chris Dwyer, MJA Studio. I'll just be providing a bit of a background of the process that we've been through from a design perspective with the City of Melville and the City of Melville's design review panel. We've just got a series of diagrams here and I'll run through those quickly. On the far left, the existing site, diagram 1. This site presents a really interesting opportunity within the Melville City Centre. It's an amalgamation of 3 sites and not just 2 sites within the direct higher zoning, but also an R40 site, which allows us to have a level of control over our sensitive interface to the north with our existing neighbours. Stage 2, we've looked to bring all of our own crossovers and consolidate it from the townhouses and the apartments into one location on Bragor. This is aligned with the directives from the Melville City Centre Structure Plan documents, as well as RCodes. This also can provide a future access through to the adjacent site to reduce conflicts on Almondbury. Stage 3, looking at how we integrate with landscape. So part of that idea of consolidating our crossovers into one is to free up more verge space for greening, with true landscaping in lieu of synthetics, as well as retaining significant trees along our northern boundary, again, just to provide further buffering to the existing residents to the north. Then we look to introduce the lower density townhouses, again, part of that buffering situation where we're looking to protect as much as we can the existing neighbours to the north. We then go to diagram 5, where we look to push our form as close to Almondbury as we can, producing over 28 metres of separation to our nearest existing northern residents. And this is also facilitating our lack of overshadowing to the neighbours. We're so far over on Almondbury. And we step up to the corner and address some of the build form strategies from the adjacent Garden City Centre. We find these heroic movements really interesting and really specific of place. Great. Sweeping shapes, the scallops, which we then look to bring through into the articulated built form, making this proposal very specific to its location. We've sought to break the built form down into the bays, which help to reduce the perception bulk and scale and really provide a more granular design outcome. With presentations to 2 design review panel meetings, the first one highlighted areas where the panels foresaw there could be greater interrogation. We then attended a second panel with a revised design and received 10 green ticks. The panel's commentary was aligned with this project being much needed in the precinct, and also the opportunity for height and scale was supportable in this location based on the way we've approached the site conditions and our response. Further to that, and I guess normally in our experience at a DRP, once you get the green ticks, that crystallises the design and it then proceeds into a larger technical review by the city. However, following community consultation, there was further feedback and we sought to engage further with the City of Melville and took on a number of their items that they flagged as a result of that, broadly being that we reduced our interface with our western neighbour. We sought to reduce heights of walls, push back, increase setbacks, create visual recessive elements in lieu of non-recessive elements. And we also looked to remove the top floor of the building at that point as well. And then moving around onto Braygore, the second element that was highlighted by the City of Melville's officers was a more sympathetic scale transition down to the R40. And we sought to achieve that through manipulating the built form and doing a very visual transition between the anchor on the corner or an Almondbury and then stepping down to the lower density neighbours. In addition to that, we had much feedback from the local residents and we sought to remove on-street visitor bays due to the perceived conflicts with students. We went through a very rigorous traffic assessment process. I have Paul here today to answer any specific queries regarding that. Largely, this is aligned with WPC's guidelines in terms of street hierarchy and traffic volumes. We are looking at only very minor impacts on the current traffic flow based on the diurnal or the travel of vehicles throughout the day from this proposal. And the key ones are that we align with the Melville City Centre Structure Plan's aspirations to remove crossovers from busy streets and bring them through onto secondaries. That's highlighted in the structure plan or the R codes. The key metrics from the proposal, they're all about great design. It's something that MJA works hard for every day of the week. Things such as diverse infill housing, design excellence, deep soil and tree retention, livable housing, no R40 overshadowing, and apartment solar ventilation. And I guess those are all volume 2 aspects. So we're in excess of all of the targets there. I'll now hand over to Chris.
Back to me.
Just to close.
Sort of just worthwhile. How are we going for time?
That's time. But,
30 seconds, that'd be great.
wrap up, I have been having others to round up.
That'd be great. Just want to touch on and respond to the key reasons for refusal. As I mentioned, the structure plan in itself evolved. The city is about to embark on a review process. Equivalent contemporary structure plans for secondary centres would typically designate a site like this as RAC2, RAC3, 6 to 8 stories. You have a look at Mirrabooka, you have a look at Claremont, you have a look at Leederville. That is probably the equivalent in terms of being adjacent to the core. That's the most likely response. And interestingly enough, even though it's 12 years ago, the part 2 of the structure plan does talk about up to 8 stories north of the centre. The key reasons for refusal primarily seem to relate to the height and setback, which is the key areas of discretion. And what we say is that the design principles referenced in clause 11.4, which the resolution suggests we are inconsistent, that talks about high quality, high density residential, increased population of the centre, no access off Almondbury, which the framework talks about, minimising overshadowing, which we don't have an issue with. And then in terms of the elements of the R codes and elements 2.2 and 2.4, talking about context, the existing character, talks about responding to topography, and the building does essentially gradiate down with the parking down Braygore, so it responds to the topography of the site. Talks about interesting roof form and communal open space. Obviously, we do that, and again, solar access. When we're talking about discretion on height, overlooking and overshadowing is a key element. We say we respond to all of that. Just finally, clause 67 is referenced as well, which again talks about built form, bulk and scale not being responsive to site. We got design excellence for this by the hard work via MJA. We've got the green ticks across all 10 design WA elements. We wouldn't be able to do that if this wasn't site responsive and displaying the site and character and future character, including the shopping centre redevelopment that I referenced. In conclusion, we know that this isn't just a ticker box. There is discretion here required, but it is an old structure plan, and we say that there's the ability for this to be improved. This is going to set a new benchmark in terms of design quality in the Melville City Centre. You have an alternative recommendation before you that we've worked closely with the city's officers on. with conditions as well. And we'd be more than happy to answer any questions as a project team and talk through that alternative recommendation also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nolan. Panel members, do you have any questions? Yes. First of all, Councillor Lim, do you have any questions?
Yes, presiding member, just a quick one. So I saw the traffic impact study that was probably shown by Darren. Could you clarify the number of vehicle movements per day on a Burger Place and how many multiples this development will be on top of the current number of traffic movements? Thank you.
I'll answer that. Paul Newen from Mac Engineering. We prepared the transport statement.
Hello, sorry, could you speak up a little bit? We can't.
We undertook traffic surveys as part of the assessment. That captured hourly volumes, which is it's about 170 vehicles per day along Breagle Place at the moment. The development
For our period, is it, or?
Yes, yeah. That's an estimate based on the hourly traffic surveys. The development itself will generate about 20 vehicle movements in the peak hour. The rule of thumb is that's 10% of the daily capacity. So you could extrapolate that to about 200 vehicles per day over a 24-hour period.
Could I have a follow-up question, please, presiding member?
Go ahead.
So effectively, if I'm doing the math properly, it's currently 170. And this proposal will effectively add 200 plus 240 a day. So it's pretty much doubling or more than double the traffic on the site.
That's correct. The current road is quite carries a low volume of traffic. So it is essentially doubling, but there is plenty of capacity to accommodate that additional traffic. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you. Perhaps I've got a couple of questions. Perhaps the first one to Darren Evans from the Centre Group. You said that this was a pilot for your residential, but I'm questioning it because you've got a 4-year deferral to update the current Garden City. So I'm wondering why you're pushing this through when you're saying it's liaising with the shopping centre, but you've put a deferral on the shopping centre.
Thank you through the chair. Councillor, on foot at the moment is a request to extend the SDAU extension for the retail centre. It is not a 4-year deferral of the project. It is an extension request because the DA was running out, and the entire team has been working very hard to get the project going from a retail perspective. Cost of construction, cost of capital have been quite difficult and constrained, large projects. We're working through being able to stage the development in smaller chunks to facilitate it proceeding. At the moment, we've recently had Coles upgrade, as you might be aware from visiting the centre. We are looking at a stage 1 in that Coles precinct as soon as possible. The desire is next year to start that. We're trying to get to that point. But more broadly, as of this year, we've embarked on a residential housing strategy across all of our centres in Australia. And we've had this development working in the background for some time with that knowledge that was coming. We now have board consent to proceed with that housing strategy. And as mentioned, we have recently had meetings with the City of Melville and the state and other local authorities to proceed. We see the opportunity to deliver both at the same time. And as you may also be aware, we've got some sites on the centre we've discussed with the city's design review panel. So there's no desire to defer Garden City or West Wilbur Lagoon for 4 years. Ideally, we would start both projects next year.
Can I have a follow-up question, please?
Go ahead.
The second gentleman spoke about the amalgamation of lots, and I'm assuming that you're meaning the amalgamation of lots suited to high density on Almondbury Road, and in particular the lot next door that some of the residents were concerned about with the 5-storey parapet wall. And then one of the deputies spoke about the laneway, and and it did occur to me that if you're talking about amalgamating those lots, does that mean extending the laneway, which will then increase the traffic flow onto Bragal?
So
Is that what you're perceiving?
in terms of, if you think about the frames surrounding the centre, you can get much better outcomes for both existing residents and future residents of any multi-residential mixed-use development in an amalgamated lots, because you've got much more room to actually transition, and you've got a much more space to get more frontage. Every element of good design comes back to amalgamation of lots. Perth has a very fragmented land ownership throughout, and that's why where you've got ability of amalgamated lots to deliver better quality housing, you've got to make the most of it. And in a situation like this, where you've got a centre which is ringed by a frame, ideally, you incentivise the amalgamation of lots to get better outcomes, including the ability of separating traffic off at Almondbury and having continuous lanes around. That's just a good long-term strategic planning decision, and that's the approach that you want to make project by project.
You didn't answer my question.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, it's about the extension of the laneway, which potentially will increase even for more traffic onto that small cul-de-sac.
we do not own 15 Almondbury Road. Some of those plans today are incorrect. We own 11 and 13 Almondbury Road, which are one over off the roundabout. That roundabout, Chris Nolan might be able to help me out. I think it's over 600 cars are going to go into that roundabout, 600 Undercroft car park at that location. So working through with the city and the design review panel, identified that there's an opportunity to take the access from 15 Almondbury through Bragal Place. This development does not rely on it. It is an opportunity that was considered. We have offered up an easement in gross to facilitate that, which will go to the council and the public at large. But it's not essential for our development, and we have no intention to buy 15 Almondbury or continue the development through. It was just a discussion around alleviating and facilitating 15 Almondbury developing, because it's on that roundabout that was shown earlier, and it may be problematic. It has a number of large trees, so access and development of that site may be constrained in the future. So that is the intent, but it was offered as part of the community benefits package as a shared arrangement, but it is only an opportunity that the council or the DAP can consider.
Any further questions, Councillor?
I think that's
You can come back later.
yeah, okay.
Okay, any further questions? Dale, I think you have.
Yeah, thank you. So you've heard and you've read the concerns about the impact of traffic on Bragal Place from the residents that live there. And Mr. Nguyen, you've given some numbers about current traffic numbers and envisaged increase in traffic numbers as a result of this development. Do you have, and if you don't, it's okay, but do you have the numbers in your head or at hand about what those numbers might look like if this development was aligned with the height provisions of the structure plan? So that comes back to yield. The yield would reduce. What would be the difference? You've said around 200 vehicles extra per day. What would that look like if it was a compliant height?
Can I ask out to what the yield would be? Would it be half, or would it be 2/3, or?
It would depend on the size of dwellings.
We've got the top two layers of penthouses.
So say 2/3.
Yeah, but the top layers are penthouses, so it would probably be actually not even.
So the current estimate based on the yield at the moment is 20 peak hour units. So if you 2/3 of that, let's say, what's that? About 17. Sorry, a bit less than that. About 14 peak hour vehicle movements. So proportionally, that would be the reduction in traffic impacts. But in the context of what constitutes a significant impact, as a guideline in the WAPC Transport Impact Assessment Guidelines, between 10 and 100 vehicles per hour are 10 is being the low impact, towards 100 is moderate to high. Whether it's 20 that's currently proposed or 14 if it was reduced, it's still quite towards that lower end. So either way, our assessment would conclude that the traffic impact would be low.
What would be, from a traffic design perspective, what would be the implications of taking access off Almondbury for the multiple dwelling component? Is that technically possible? Is it undesirable, desirable? What's your view on that?
The extent of the frontage is close to the existing roundabout. There's guidelines over placing driveways within proximity to large intersections. So within that extent of frontage, there's not really any ideal location that would facilitate access to this development. If we were to tie into the roundabout, if that were a possibility, in roundabout design, you ideally want to balance the traffic flows on all legs. So there'd be a high demand on the other legs and there'd be such a low demand on the development leg that it would be unbalanced and wouldn't result in a good traffic outcome. So essentially, considering all the merits and the constraints, Bragle Place was the ideal location for access, considering all the constraints, including traffic, the frontage, and the volumes along Almondbury and all of that.
Thank you. Now, if we assume just for a minute that it was technically possible to get approval to take access off Almondbury, I'm not talking about under the structure plan, I'm talking about from a road safety perspective, directing these to the designers on the team, what would the implications be on the design of those lower ground floors of having to take access off Almondbury? What would you need to do to that design?
Well, you'd have to remove apartments at ground level, so you're reducing interaction on Almondbury, which obviously has flow-on effects to the future character of Almondbury itself.
I think that, I guess when you look at the frame more broadly and you see what happens along Marmy and Risley Street, where you end up with multiple lots that have multiple driveways, all severing pedestrian footpaths, loss of street trees and verge space. It has a very negative urban outcome for that precinct. This is really looking at it from a holistic.
So I get that, but what would it mean for this development? How would you need to change it? You've alluded to having to amend apartments. Would be fairly significant change, or is it a change that could accommodate?
Well, it would be a very significant redesign of the building, because we don't have any driveway access from that level. We only have apartments on that floor. So you'd be trying to dive a ramp down in line with the gradient, which is you're losing the battle because you're travelling at the same rate, you're not getting down quick enough. So it would result in a very poor outcome.
And you'd have to push height higher essentially to maintain the amount of housing and so on.
Okay, and just
make one comment on that. There's a lot of difficulty with mid-sized projects and the tiering of structure, particularly at the moment in terms of cost of construction. So you will see, if you have the timeline from when we had public comment, when we relodged, there was quite a few months. And what we did in that phase was work through the extra transition. And we effectively had to redesign the whole grid of the structure to minimise transfer beams and all those sorts of things. So there might be some complications around the tiering. The ability to tier over a ramp is quite difficult, costly, and it just adds to that extra cost and complexity, and getting a builder at the moment for that type of work is difficult.
Okay, and then just one last thing. So I think you did confirm this, but I want to double check it. So it is not correct that the developer of this site owns the adjacent property at 15 Almondbury, is that right?
It's owned by some long-term landowners. The name's Fiore. We do not own it. We've had interaction with them because we've had some difficulties from a neighbourly perspective with our existing houses. And they've provided a letter of non-objection to the development, but we do not own 15 Almondbury, and we don't have a contract, we're not negotiating, we have no desire to buy it.
That's it, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Yes, Francesca.
A couple of questions regarding traffic. If anyone can answer these, I don't have a specific person to it. My first question is pretty basic. I know you've provided it, but can you confirm the capacity of the road network relative to your development? You've indicated at 200 movements per day. Can you confirm the classification of Bragle Place in terms of its capability and the number of vehicles it's capable?
Yeah. So Bragle Place is currently classified as an access street. There's a hierarchy within access streets. Bragle Place is probably at the lower end. Access street. According to the livable neighbourhood guidelines, the target daily volume would be about 1,000 vehicles per day for a short.
1,000 vehicles per day. Thank you. And do you have any commentary in relation to both your peak period of movement? A similar question that I asked earlier. I'm interested in about congestion on the street. It's been raised now as a number of concerns, both verbally and in the present and in the written material we have. Can you speak about the congestion on the street that is currently occurring in terms of school movements and other movements? That's one part of the question, but I'm ultimately going to my question, which is the implications of this development on the experience that is currently occurring with traffic congestions, which is beyond your control as a development. So I'm attempting to separate out and seeking a response from you about the impact of this development on the concerns that have been raised in the material we have about traffic congestion and traffic safety, and that then leads on to pedestrian safety. So in your response, can you speak to your development and its relationship impact or consequence on that particular concern?
So in terms of the development itself.
And sorry, you need to speak a bit louder, sorry.
Development itself with the estimation is 20 peak hour vehicles.
And peak hour for you is classified as 7 to 9 in the morning?
Typically, it's somewhere between 7 and 9 a.m. And then in the afternoon, anywhere between 4 and 6. So the
afternoon peak is typically beyond the school peak? Is that
correct? So in the morning, they do coincide. In the afternoon, school's usually quite cleared and school associated traffic usually quite cleared by the time the typical road network peak starts.
Okay.
And so the peak hour volumes of 20 vehicles per hour, that's what the development's proposed to generate. As mentioned before, that's about 60% of the daily capacity of Bragle Place. So in terms of the impact, the traffic impact is at the lower end. And a lot of the congestion that's currently occurring, obviously that's caused by the school, and that's typical of any school location. There's a very intense period of congestion. Everything slows down. We've got the low speed limits to slow down traffic to make it safer, because every school has interactions between vehicles and pedestrians. So all those factors will help to mitigate the impact of the minor increase in traffic caused by the development.
Thank you. My next question is, there's been a number of comments in relation to both height to plot ratio and community benefit. I'm interested for you to extrapolate further. There is information contained both in the RA, your submission, as well as your most recent information. Can you speak to what you say you are providing as community benefit, and can you allocate where you're taking that from? And you can reference 2.8 or any other provision. I'm talking about 2.8, but you can reference other provision. Can you speak to what it is you say you are presenting in this development as a community benefit?
I might need some help on 2.8, but so post advertising of the development, we had a written request from the city to provide an analysis against the discretion sought and provide a calculation of the proportionality of the development to the discretion. As mentioned earlier, there isn't a clear methodology in the framework for doing that, and I'm not sure about clause 2.8. We then responded in December with written justification in relation to the design and planning merit and locational characteristics as justification for the home. A lot of what we've said today and all design. We did not respond with the calculation
or a breakdown of costs. And I think part of that was the design review panel pushed us quite a long way in terms of design excellence. And we felt like there was a little bit of double dipping on across, and there wasn't a clear measure. But in the new year, there was a follow-up request from the city for that calculation. And with that, there came a methodology for determining how community benefit might look. And that was 3% of the construction value above the flood. That was a method provided by the city. It's not in this particular location, but at least we had something to work with, because I think everyone was looking for a good outcome. So we engaged our QS to, and also with that request, a request to cost the design elements that we had presented in our justification. So things that other developments in the area hadn't done in terms of design. So we engaged our QS to do that 3% calculation and costed up some of those elements of landscaping, facades, and other bits and pieces that someone else could probably describe a lot better than I could. But we then arranged a meeting with the city to work that through. We were asked to also show our feasibility analysis, which we had resisted for some time, but we tabled a version. We were also asked to table a compliant version, which we did. And we went through that process with the city. Ultimately, the city's officers discussed that with the elected members, the local board members, and they came back with essentially that those design elements were not supported as a community benefit, and we hadn't initially suggested that they were. We were just saying this is the justification on the why this is a good idea. And what came back was a request for a financial contribution to the local area from the council. Also, there was some discussion around, we had a work from home centre at the ground floor, we still do, and the conversion of that into a publicly accessible place, what we've called the business centre. The city's placemaking and bookings team agreed that it was a good idea and suggested some plan modifications in terms of external access, electronic keypad, universal access toilet inclusion, and also tenure for the city, a title. They were the requests. We accommodated those changes in the latest version of the plans, and we submitted them to the city. We also proposed a financial contribution equivalent to the cost of a footpath for the entire length of Braggle Place. We did that because it's a tangible asset that is connected to the development, and there were concerns around pedestrian safety, which I think we've demonstrated are not as great a concerns have been made out. So, in summary, well, I might just go further. I guess what we looked at was how we furthered the objectives of the structure plan through those elements. And they come down to the shared access way, which is addressing the Almondbury, the conflict at the roundabout, streetscape upgrades, which the structure plan talks to, activation, facades, high quality designs. So the community benefit package of those sort of four things: design excellence, shared access way, business centre, their footpath contribution. In terms of the footpath, we're happy for it to be a contribution. We're also happy to construct the footpath as part of the development if that is desired. But we understood that the city might look at some other changes in Braggle Place with that money. So we had it as a discretionary item. That's effectively, haven't addressed 2.8. Chris?
You don't have to specifically address it. I was saying you could.
Yeah, okay, I'm not aware of that.
Just on that 3% value, it's in the RAR, but you know that talks about that 3% over and above the equivalent $275,000. If you look at the business centre, the shared workspace, the contribution for the footpath, and the shared access way, we want to take that. And again, that's just as Darren mentioned before, that's something that we had talked about with the officers in helping to alleviate traffic from an Almondbury perspective. You know, that's in excess of $500,000, well above that 3% construction value, which again is taken from, as I understand, the Canning Bridge proposed benefit provisions around a value equivalent. So the list there is long, but that's about a lot of those design elements in excess of the structure plan requirements. If you take those three key elements that Darren talked about, it's well in excess of the, let's say, $275,000 that's suggested in terms of that 3% number.
Your footpath you referred to, that is beyond the property boundary of your site, continuing in front of existing property.
Sorry, say that again.
Footpath
Yep.
extension, the footpath you're referring to, you indicated then, that is beyond the frontage of subject property.
Correct, and that's where we've offered up a contribution as well to take that. We've offered up, and obviously there needs to be liaison with the city to build it on behalf of. But yes, the intent is from the head of the cul-de-sac through to Liebenberg to build that, which should help again in the context of the pedestrian concerns, particularly at the afternoon peak period at school, offering up two options in terms of the footpath.
Thank you. I move on to slightly different set of questions. As you would have seen in the material that's been published, there is an alternate recommendation requested through the 13 process. I note there's a series of conditions, and I note your submission talked to those conditions. I would like to hear further from you in relation to those two matters, and I've got in front of me the material that you presented or you provided in relation to various conditions. So I'd like you to speak further. You can also reference to the earlier question I had, which these specifically speak to, and I'll go a little bit more specific. And in your comments, you've made some comments about what you believe should or shouldn't be included in that, and I'd like you to speak further to those elements. Thank you.
Before we do that, could I suggest that we take a break for 5 minutes for the comfort of all in sundry? So in doing so, I will suspension of standing orders to allow that. Moving, sorry. Do I have a seconder? Yes, okay. All panel members in favour? Yes, that's unanimous. Thank you. 5 minute break. There are toilets in the corridor around the side for those that wish to. There's also water on the table for those doing their presentations at the moment. I can hear a few in their throats every now and then.
No. Email? Yeah, sure.
Yes. Oh, well, I think, yes.
Sorry, so.
Down. Put a thumbs up. You got section for the We'll resume the meeting now. Thank you. Now, had asked a question. Francesco asked a question. Who is answering?
I can have that.
Your name? Sorry.
Rebecca from it's Rebecca Traglioni.
Thank you, Rebecca.
So the question was around the condition changes that we're seeking.
The question related to plus you've submitted some changes, so you can speak to both elements. Obviously, you're most likely to.
So we're supportive of the majority of the conditions behind them. We have sought a couple of changes to conditions 32 to 35. And the overarching theme of those changes is that we don't really require a deed to deliver some of the community benefits that we're proposing as part of the application. The reason is that what we're proposing that goes above and beyond just the development itself is the footpath along Braga between Almondbury and Leverburg. And that can be in the form of contribution or a condition in itself. And then just the easement enclose that goes over the communal driveway. So both of those can be delivered without a deed. There's no real need to put a deed in place. And it would just be a lot more straightforward if they were just standing conditions. And the one other thing is the city's advice note 6 has asked for a contribution, the value of the footpath plus $75,000 above and beyond providing the business centre. And that amount was on the basis that the city was originally going to take ownership of the business centre, but late in the piece, they basically said, no, we don't want to take that anymore, and we'll have a contribution instead. Centre Group is still going to provide the business centre to the public, so people can book it. It'll be all run by Centre Group's management. So we're still providing the business centre, and it's still going to be available to the public. So we don't think there's fair grounds to ask for a contribution on top of that.
Okay, does that answer your question?
My question. They were all my questions at this juncture.
Okay.
Thank you.
Further questions of yes, councillor.
I'm thinking when Ms. Page asked a question to the designers about the impact of having exit off Almondbury Road, and you said that was just way too hard and it would have meant a deep gradient underground driveway, which is not ideal. It did make me start thinking about a couple of alternatives. Is there an opportunity for an alternative to a slip road to join the laneway from Almondbury? That would mean that you'd have to trim your building. Is that a better option in terms of design? It'd be nice if you could buy the adjacent block that's currently owned by a private owner. You see where I'm getting from, to try and join up the laneway at the back to a slip road onto Almondbury?
Well, look, the broader understanding that we've had through this design process is not to interfere with Almondbury, not to bring a crossover across. We had to provide a crossover through there. It's undesirable from a traffic planning perspective. I obviously can't speak to that, but from a design perspective, it would just have ramifications for the site. It would introduce, traffic directly adjacent to someone else's property boundary. At number 15, they would have cars coming up and down, and we would need to make sure that there was no opportunity for, I guess, once Braga was converted into a cul-de-sac, that was done intentionally. We wouldn't want to be compromising that through introducing a laneway.
I think in the context of what the entire precinct's trying to achieve, and then you look at the numbers of traffic generated in peak hour, 20 per hour, that's 1 every 3 minutes. Like if we sit here and wait for 3 minutes for the next car, it's low volumes in the context of what Bragal can take. So the best design outcome holistically is to have traffic located where we have.
Anybody approached the city about removing the cul-de-sac at the top of Almondbury and recreating it at the bottom of Bragal onto Leverburg?
We haven't been approached. There was discussion in terms of the contribution that the city could look to do other changes in Bragal Place, the footpath contribution as opposed to doing the footpath. No, we haven't been approached about that. It's the city's road effectively.
Do you think that would be a sensible, yes?
From a traffic perspective, having a new intersection at Bragal and Almondbury that close to the roundabout, it creates other issues, right turn capacity from turning onto Bragal Place. So ideally, when you're funneling traffic in a residential cell you want them to approach via the main intersections, which is I think Links and Risley, to create a new intersection at that point at Braymore would kind of disrupt the proper kind of layout of a residential network or of a transport network.
You're saying a major distributor that would upset the traffic, but you're willing to put traffic on 30, 40K roads. That doesn't make sense to me.
I think there's a perception that 20 vehicles per hour is a large number, but it's not. The guideline we have is 10 vehicles per peak is low impact, 100 is moderate to high. We're at 20 vehicles, we're quite close to that low. So I think there's just a perception that 20 vehicles is a large number that would warrant looking at pushing that traffic to another road. So yeah, that's the gist.
Okay, any further questions? Yes, Councillor Lim.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I think this is a question for what Rebecca was mentioning before around the business centre. Could you clarify how the centre group management intends to ensure that the business centre and its associate amenities, such as the toilet, will be genuinely accessible and promoted to the general public? So I'm thinking, during high demand periods like, students having exams, would there be like a friendly online booking system in place? Could you elaborate more on that? Thank you.
Thank you through the chair. Councillor, the intention isn't that centre group manage the business centre. We see that the body corporate can manage the business centre through an online portal. Most new residential developments are very technically advanced and they have building management systems and software packages that residents can book facilities and engage with a whole range of things in their building. Based on the city's feedback, there's a keypad lock on the outside. So I think, for want of a better description, it would kind of be like an Airbnb type arrangement where someone can book it online. They'll get the code, they'll be able to access that space. There is an internal door, Chris, that separates that facility from the lounge, the Balance Lounge. So that could be locked at the same time. And the universal access toilet is in that same bookable space. So that's how we would see it. It'd be an online system connected to either through the strata company or the body corporate itself.
And Darren, just to be clear, it is the intention, it being publicly accessible, not just the residents itself. It's beyond that and could be advertised as such.
Yeah, there's no problem with that. So we were happy with the business centre, so as long as residents could use it in non-booking times, so they would still have that amenity. We provided a separate terrace for it to be accessed. So I think it's a 48 square metre tenure, for want of a better description, with our intent. So yeah, locally advertised. We would see it as a local benefit for the nearby community. And there is also one in a similar development in Mount Pleasant that operates in a similar fashion.
Councillor
Yeah, if I can have a follow-up question. So is there an instance where the body corporate could decide to not share it with the public? Is that a possibility? Thank you.
It may be the case that residents could book the place as well. I think it would just be a normal booking system where people can book it. So I don't think it's going to have a permanent booking scenario by the internal residents, but I would think that could be managed through software.
But just to give you a reference point, at CERC, essentially it's built into the body corporate laws, so they can't delete the use of it from them.
Okay, that's reassuring. Thank you.
I just have a question in regard to that. Was that originally offered to the council as a strata lot?
Correct. Yes, there was.
Council said they didn't want it.
The council requested it, tenure over that space.
I'm saying you don't want to give them tenure.
No, we're happy to. We were happy to give it to. We offered it to the city. In the final RAR, the city's report mentions that they do not want the tenure, but we are more than happy for the city to have it. as originally offered as part of the package.
With tenure.
With tenure.
Yeah, I foresee problems, as you do, I think, with the body corporate running it. Because body corporates generally don't have permanent residents, permanent managers. They have strata managers, but they aren't on site.
It would be a dedicated strata manager for the building. I think most of
site.
On site, I don't
have a caretaker.
There probably would be a caretaker. I would think there would be one resident that would have a caretaker role.
Okay.
But I think there are other examples of the Cirque Duet in Mount Pleasant where there's a bookable system.
It's just on the strata bylaws that exists.
Yeah, I realise that strata bylaws you can do it, but in practice, that is what sort of action?
In practice, I would think it would be the strata company managing it. It was a caretaker on site.
All right, thank you very much. Any further question of the presenters? If not, well, we've had, thank you very much. Had long discourse on that, and we would like to invite local government off to the table to enable the panel to ask questions about, or firstly, for you to make comment on any observations you've made or you have from the presentations. Secondly, we'll ask questions, I'm sure. Now, who do we have here? Just so that I know.
My name's Josh Cracchiolo. I'm the acting principal planner.
Yep.
Kamal Khalil, Traffic and Road Safety, City of Melville.
Thank you, Kamal.
Gavin Ponton, Acting Director, City of Melville.
Thank you, Gavin, for the people here that don't know you. Thank you. All right, panel members, sorry, initially, do you wish to make any observations on comments that have been made, or you just go straight to questions?
Clarification on the business centre. Steve was just talking about moments ago. The city initially, as was presented, did seek the business centre as a community benefit. On review, the ongoing issues in terms of managing a tenancy owned by the city in terms of maintenance, etc., it was determined that it was no longer a facility that the city wished to own and run. That's where we've landed in the final report. Happy for the facility to operate and provide benefit to the community, but at this point in time, the city's preference is not to take ownership of the tenancy.
Thank you. Right. Any questions of the? You have a presentation, is that? Sorry. Yes. Yep. Okay. Go right ahead.
Thank you, panel. I'll just quickly run through. Firstly the amended plans that the applicant has done at the request of the city. So they have sought to reduce scale towards the R40 northern side of the development. The key issue is the building height. They've sought to buffer with the group dwelling site to the north, but it's still it's quite considerable. That's one of the key areas of discretion for the DAP to consider today. You can see there on figure 53 the intent that's taken from structure plan part 2. It's for it to scale towards the R40 zone synthetic scale. So this figure here shows the subject site and 8 Braygall Place Apartments, which we heard from earlier as a deputation. And it's a crude figure, but it just shows that there is a bit of a scale difference in that streetscape. This is if you were standing south of the development, looking north. But as you're traversing in Braygall Place, there is a bit of a disjointed scale in that streetscape of Braygall Place. Another of the key areas of discussion is the side setbacks and building separation. Shows this is in the RA as well. It just shows the area of discretion the applicant is seeking. The city would consider that adequate separation with boundary walls to scale hasn't been provided, impacting the lot to the west on Arlenby Road. Other key issue, which there's no framework for community benefits in the structured plan area for the frame. But the city sought to try and flesh that out in terms of what the applicant is offering and where does that sit with the proposed. So a lot of the community benefits in that list there and in the RA perhaps may not be considered a community benefit, but from the community at large, but would be considered a community benefit under the planning framework. Dwelling diversity, sustainability, streetscapes, provide trees. Whilst the community benefits proposed are considered significant, it's not considered to suitably expression the applicant will see. Sorry, we've got the road safety coordinator here, who's, if there's any technical questions on traffic, Kamal Khalil can answer that. It wasn't in the slides, but it's understood that traffic is a talked about topic so far. So.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Yes, Francesca.
Could you provide a response? Thank you very much for your presentation and your details. Could you provide a response to the applicant's comments as well as the material they provided in relation to the footpath? They have suggested as part of the material that they are willing to contribute either financially and or install a footpath along the full length of the Braygall Place. My question in that context is there are a couple of key issues that relate to this development, one being height and one being concerns of traffic movement and particularly pedestrian safety. Could you provide a comment on pedestrian safety in relation to the footpath that has been suggested to be provided as part of this development in addressing going a significant way? And I note that some of the presenters indicated that despite a footpath in the street, students are still walking on the road. Can you provide a comment from the city's perspective about the impact of the additional pathway addressing concerns that have been raised regarding pedestrian safety and movement, student movement?
Thank you for that question. So Kamal could explain a little bit more about that, but the footpath is something that the applicant proposed and the city happy to accommodate as well. There is an existing footpath on the other side of Braygall Place, close to the current crosswalk that students cross into and others cross into the centre. Another footpath is good as well. Our assets team have have said if there's going to be a footpath out the front of this development, it should just go all the way to Leverberg Street, which is towards the school. So if the applicant has proposed that, imagine that's a good outcome, but there were no concerns about the existing footpath on the other side of the road from our team. It's enough to handle. I mean, the kids do just walk on the road, strength by numbers kind of approach, and I don't want to use the footpath, but yeah, I'll get Kamal as well to speak about the footpath.
I think the main issue here is the sheer volume of pedestrian footprint that use Braybrook Street. In the morning, probably the count was approximately about 150, 160. That's the morning peak pedestrian or students using the road. You got a PM peak students, about roughly 400 students uses that road. The most unlikely the students will use a footpath. Basically, they will dominate the road. That's what's happening at the moment. Even so, with traffic, with the current traffic volume of the road, the students use the road. So the addition of a new footpath is not going to take the student away from still. One cater for some number of students.
So a follow-up question in that context, and I'm separating in a similar way that I've asked earlier, separating the obligation responsibility of this development with some of the existing experiences that occurred in relation to student movement. And so separating those out, I suppose I've got two sub-questions. One is the city taking other actions to manage either pedestrian movements that are obviously not a consequence of this development, and or parent parking, also not a consequence of this development, as expressed in the submissions that we've been receiving and the presentations we've had. Is the city doing any other actions in relation to that?
In regards to traffic during the peak hour, which is in the morning and afternoon peak, throughout the city as frequency.
Just a fraction louder.
So during the morning and afternoon peak school hours, there will be traffic congestion around the street, around the school, on the streets around the school. So those congestion probably will last for 20 to 50, 20 to 30 minutes, and then just disappear. And this is not just unique to this area, it is throughout the whole city. Most schools, they experience the same congestion.
So given the comments that the congestion is quite a short period of time from the city's perspective, and the applicant has indicated, and we've received material about pedestrian movement, is the city satisfied that the development contribution to addressing pedestrian safety and movement in the area is proportionate to their contribution as a result of this development?
From this, the only contribution from what I see from the traffic point of view is the traffic on the street is going to be double than what it is now, more than double. And that's really increase the risk of students subjected to traffic. That's another disadvantage.
So there's an increase in traffic. I suppose my question is, and the report says you're satisfied generally with the movement of traffic in the TIS. Are you saying that the development generates something that is problematic, that needs to be addressed? The reading that I've got of the material is that the proposed development does increase traffic, but it's not unacceptable in the context of the classification of the road and the peak movements relative to development and other things that are happening in the area. That's the read I have. Is that different to what you're telling me now?
In terms of, technically, that will be correct. There's different classification in terms of the road hierarchy. The metropolitan road hierarchy has got different classification. Living neighborhood has got different classification. Probably the lowest local access road is expected the maximum desirable traffic volumes up to 1,000. But that's in general in a normal condition, normal situation. You don't probably expect that number of pedestrians using that particular road. For normal situations, that would be acceptable. No issue with that. That increase due to this development. But when you go that number of students using that particular road, that might be a little bit added risk to the students.
So your comment about
in terms of classification, what I'm saying is that classification applies to the normal situation. What I'm saying here is this is a unique situation.
Yes, yes, I appreciate your comment about it. Are you saying that the applicant should be doing something different because they have got the design puts an access point in to the street to Bagel? The student movements are, as I say, beyond development itself. Yeah. Are you satisfied with the proposal in terms of the treatment that the applicant has given? Or are you saying that there's something further they should be doing?
From what I see, the way I understand it, there's got 2 access driveway. That's easy condition, but it's adding traffic. So I'm not sure exactly what sort of treatment you're referring to here.
Well, I've got a similar question, and that is that the applicants can't do anything different because the council's planning framework says you shall take traffic onto and off of Bragle. So in doing so, the applicants have said, well, we'll put another. We know that there's pedestrians coming and going all, during the peak hour when the schools are running for a limited time period. I mean, you're going to have 200 in 1 hour and maybe 100 either side of that or something. But question is, you're saying that 1 car is too many, or 2 cars is too many, or 200 is too many. Now, given that, what else has to be done? I mean, do parents drive into that Bragle place and park and wait for their kids to come in? So if that's the case, do you restrict that during those time periods?
The park restriction on the road to stop any vehicle from using or driving or parking on Bragle Road.
There is now.
There's a one side, but if it's needed, could be more restriction, but that
might upset the residents, but that's okay.
Parks on the residents as well.
Yes.
So the question
the street is being used by outside vehicles now. So I've seen photos of cars parked in.
So the issue is not just purely to what is proposed.
We could herd the kids in to 2 footpaths would be all right.
Even so, that the development doesn't really generate too much traffic as far as the development, but still added. As it is, there is a risk.
Any development there will bring in cars, which will increase the risk. But what's an acceptable risk? Walking across the street is a risk. We accept that. Okay.
Tack a question onto that to flesh that out a little bit further. So when your structure plan was developed, and you allocated high density development rights, and understandably you didn't anticipate for this site necessarily the height that's been contemplated, but you contemplated higher density development rights in Bragle Place and on Almondbury. At that point, were students using Bragle Place to get to the shopping centre or not?
Yes, that's been ongoing.
Since Applecross Island was built, in Burragoon. Okay. All right, further questions of, yes.
Are you done?
You finished?
I've got another one, but you go. That's good.
Okay, go ahead.
So just a few more general questions. So your report on the issue of community benefit, your report states that the framework for community benefits is specific to the city centre itself, not for the frame precinct where the subject site is located. So does your planning framework require community benefits for extra height on this site or not?
It doesn't, no. So the framework.
Where are you getting your mandate from to ask for them?
So I guess under ARCO's Volume 2, which we have assessed it against, it was 2.8. It does seek to provide for additional scale for community benefits. So in light of there being no framework, we have, for that particular site, we have utilised the ARCO's Volume 2 to guide that, and other structure plans which entertain community benefits in the city, such as the Canning Bridge Activity Centre.
Okay, thank you. So one of the presenters stated in their submission that part 2 of the structure plan suggests that up to 8 stories would be appropriate north of the centre. Could you comment on that, please? That captured in part 2 of your...
What was the first part of the question?
So one of the presenters stated that in part 2 of the structure plan, it includes some commentary that up to 8 stories would be appropriate north of the centre. Could you comment on that? Well, I guess I'll flesh that out a little bit. So on page 7 of your report, you've stated that you've recently commenced a review of your structure plan. You're looking to reconsider an appropriate height and scale within both the centre and the frame. You may not be able to, but if you are, can you give us some insight into your early thinking in this regard? Also, reconsider the provisions relating to access. I'm just trying to understand where...
It's a difficult question to answer, but we are in the early stages of review of the structure plan. It's approaching its 10-year limit. We're going through a visioning process at the moment, which intends to aim at coming up with a scope to review the structure plan. And at this stage, probably the most I can say is that indications are that there is opportunity to explore the existing height controls.
Moving on to the boundary walls, you've stated that the boundary walls on the western side impact the adjoining property's outlook, ventilation and morning solar access. But this adjoining property owner, who is not the Centre Group, has stated non-objection to the development. And this is me saying this probably because they have future development aspirations that can whip around and won't be compromised by this development. So why then would you use that as a key area of concern in your report?
So I would say that just generally, just because we don't get any concerns from the neighbour when we advertise an area for discretion, doesn't mean that it's appropriate in terms of amenity, stuff like that. This neighbour is a letter of objection with a view for developing or selling property themselves. So
just on that
is probably not the same as someone who is seeking to live there long term.
So I agree with you in that you don't automatically take a letter of no objection because you're never sure how that has been obtained, but you seem to be relying a lot in your reasons for refusal for such a substantial development on the impact on this neighbour. And given this neighbour has said, hey, I'm okay, I'm curious as to why there's such a heavy reliance on the impact on this neighbour.
Yeah, so the boundary walls at that scale is not something that I guess the structure plan has considered. Structure plan does allow for 2-story boundary walls. That's fine. That's kind of it's as of right. But at this scale and combined with the height, generally you seek separation the building goes higher, provide for ventilation between sites. So that is a main concern, as well as height. And they kind of play together, so that the lack of separation as it goes up in height does create an impact, and that impact is on the streetscape as well, as that western property.
Just on the issue of access of Almondbury, so the structure plan doesn't say no. It says we prefer not to if there are other options. So in this case, there is another option, but there are properties along Almondbury that don't have other options. How do you deal with those?
Yeah, the structure plan talks about the future of Almondbury and ultimately it becoming more of a pedestrian friendly environment, reducing crossovers. There is the option on this site for alternative, and it is a case of weighing up the benefits of not disrupting pedestrian flow and the amenity on Almondbury versus the impact of directing those extra cars onto Bragor. So there is a balance, but the structure plan generally tries to avoid multiple crossovers to Almondbury and use secondary streets or alternatives where possible. I take your point. We don't have a lot of mechanisms in place to achieve alternative access for the bulk of the properties on Almondbury. There's no sort of policy position in terms of rationalising crossovers, creating laneways such as the one being proposed in this development. So it will be challenging moving forward. It'll be a case of amalgamating properties, exploring opportunities for shared access. I'd say it'd be something that we'll look at in the review of the structure plan.
A challenge, I would suspect. So good luck with that. Just last one from me. So if this panel decides to go with the alternate, it's a very minor thing, to approve, condition 1 isn't needed anymore, given the Planning and Development Amendment Act is now operational. If this panel is of a mind to approve, would you be happy for us just to delete that administratively?
You could refresh my memory as to what condition 1 is.
It talks about the dual approval under the MRS.
Yeah, no.
That's all I have for now.
Thank you. Francesca, did you say you had some further questions?
Yes, my question's a little bit similar in relation to the concerns regarding height. And I note that the provisions talk about height. You've also got discretion generally in your scheme under clause 34. I think it's clause 34 of the scheme for general discretion. My questions are about the overall design. The design we have in front of us has the height pushed towards Almondbury facing the shopping centre, and we have a graduating or tapering down along Bragor to a group dwelling development on the corner. The report talks a lot about concern of height. Can you speak about height in context, locational context of Almondbury, which on the framework that I've got in front of me talks about an R100 opposite both obviously Almondbury Road itself, which is heavy traffic movement, but also opposite the shopping centre. Can you explain further the concerns you have about design and design and height in its locational context on Almondbury, or are you more concerned about the tapering down at Bragor? I just wanted to separate out the two roads.
Thank you for that question. So in terms of the Almondbury frontage, it's considered that maybe perhaps, except for the boundary walls on the western elevation, not to have an impact on the amenity of Almondbury Road. So we would be relatively happy with the interface on Almondbury. It tapers down, got the buffer with the group dwelling, but don't consider that interface with with R40 zoning to be appropriate. That would partly be because they are starting at 7 stories on Armoury, so there's only so much, I guess, tapering down you could do. So I understand their amended plans, but that would be our main concern, is the interface with the north. So that's down down Brago Place.
So could we go back to that specific issue? The plans that I've got and material I've seen shows that there is the taller building up at Almondbury, corner of Bragle, laneway, and then group dwellings at 3. What is the aspect you're concerned about? The interface, including your RA, of the group dwellings seems consistent with the form and scale of the R40 down Bragle. Can you just explain a little bit further about the area of concern that you're talking about in relation to this sort of interface? Is it that side on Bragle or is it somewhere else?
So there is, as you would be standing along Brago Place, the city would consider that there's a bit of a disjointed interface between the multiple dwelling part of the development and the townhouses. We do understand the applicant is seeking to mitigate that tapering down with the townhouses, but essentially it's still the same outcome as if it was just abutting someone else's R40 property, 2-story townhouses. So there is a bit of a disjointed interface there from the height.
So given the separation you're talking about, what are the amenity impacts? So I acknowledge your point about the 2 different forms. Typically, we then go from, as part of that conversation on form, what is the concern of amenity impact? The report says it's compliant with overshadowing, overlooking. Typically, where there's a variation of an element, the conversation ends up looking at the impact and the consequence of that. What do you say that is, beyond your earlier comment about the form are different? What's the impact of that?
So the impact would be between, so the built form between that multiple dwelling and the group dwelling, presenting it as bulk to those group dwellings, and also the streetscape of Brago Place. So part of the consideration for height is the R-code's volume 2 is context in the streetscape where it sits. So that is one thing that does require discretion. Yeah.
As well, we recognise the applicant has, through their design and through their acquiring land outside the structure plan, has sought to create the transition that the structure plan was trying to achieve with that additional land. I guess the concern boils down to a bigger building has crept closer to the R40 area. We accept that. In doing so, it has built in its own buffer with the townhouses, but in terms of the expectation in the locality, a larger building has moved further north is probably the key issue. Moving forward, there are these impacts in terms of height, bulk, expectation of the community.
Thank you. They were my comment, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
For questions.
Councillor Lim, you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, presiding member. So I have 2 questions really. I think first one's a quick one. It's just around the 1.67 million attributed to the exemplary design. So is that now considered a community benefit by the city? I saw there's a yes on the column. Can you comment on that? Thank you.
Thank you, City, for the question. The city's recommendation is to not support the application, and we've provided commentary on the community benefits. As Josh has mentioned, we acknowledge they are significant, but not in keeping with the amount of discretion sought. So we, in terms of the value assigned to some of the design elements, I believe we've commented that we feel that some of those design elements don't meet the requirements of true community benefits, but amongst the others, there are some tangible community benefits that we think do meet the traditional definition. But in conclusion, we don't think there's enough to offset the bulk being sought.
Okay, thank you. Could I ask a second question now? Thank you. So this is more to Kamal. So currently Braga Place is classified as local access street D. So with a maximum desirable benefit of 1,000. So with the existing and proposed development, we're projected to pretty much hit nearly half the capacity. So do we have any estimates on how many like similar scale developments will happen based on today's knowledge? And is it going to hit that 1,000 mark? Thank you.
Well, it depends on what's proposed, what is the size of those developments. So the traffic generation depends on the number of students or the number of parking spaces that will be created on the future development. So at this stage, probably we have to say, but if there's similar development, more than that, that might result on hitting that figure, that 1,000.
Yeah, could I ask a follow-up question on that? So I guess the question is really, if the traffic volume does exceed it with future development, what would be the next step? Is it as a matter of classifying to street C or B, and then you would have to propose what Councillor Barber was saying, removing the cul-de-sac and joining that to Almond Brae? Is that what would the next steps look like if we hit over that 1,000 limit? Thank you.
Well, if that happens, that we'll seek a risk assessment from the applicant. So what is the risk on pedestrian or on the residents? How that's going to impact on the current situation? So based on that risk assessment, basically the further measure will need to be taken, or probably altogether find out alternative access to development. So it depends on how that's going to be mitigated.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, further questions? Yes.
I have one last question for you. Under the MCCSP 10.2, it says urban formal precincts. And in there it talks about, when we're talking about specifically built form, it says here there's no site cover, lot ratio or open space requirement unless otherwise specified. Further down in the document, it talks about setbacks. Am I correct in interpreting that the structure plan management of built form is principally based on setbacks and the height
and setbacks?
But the rest of the form, those things like plot ratio, open space are not applicable in this particular case.
My understanding, I might defer to my statutory planner.
So I have the document.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well, is that height, those setbacks in the structure plan.
The mechanism of density and
intensity of development, yes, that's my understanding. We have assessed it fully against volume 2 of the R codes because that is considered a change to a code rather than a state planning policy that was adopted appropriate in this case as well. So we have assessed it against that and basically stacked up with the R codes volume 2 except for height design principles. Setbacks, objectives.
And this document is structure plan being due regard with the discretion sitting in your scheme. I think it's clause 34, your general discretion provision.
Yeah, I think it's 34, 32. Yeah. So yeah, there does sit discretion in the scheme.
Okay. Thank you. No more
Thank
questions.
you. No further questions of the council staff. Okay, that being the case, the panel will now move into a discussion on the item. We have before us a responsible authority recommendation, and that is for refusal. In order that we can discuss the recommendation, do I have a mover? Councillor Lim. Seconder?
Second.
Okay, Councillor Lim, you wish to speak to the item?
Yes, I do, Presiding Member. So I think just to summarize, what's being proposed here is a 7-story development reaching up to 26.8 meters, well beyond the 4-story that's proposed by the structure plan. So by taking this proposal, I feel that due to the developers effectively bypassing the local planning controls set by the structure plan. So this also undermines developers like Shahel from Infinity 8 who adhered to the rules. So instead of sort of like pushing the boundaries, in effect, we're sort of punishing responsible behaviors like his and rewarding developers that sort of disregarding established guidelines by the city. So, but I think what's more concerning is the proposed vehicular entry via Brega. So with 102 car bays, this will funnel traffic directly past more than 2,000 students in Apricot Senior High, plus more from Ardross Primary School, which is neighboring that. So many of whom walk to Westfield Burgoon after school, often without using the footpath. So while the excessive sort of building height is troubling, the traffic diversion is actually the greater concern here. So this isn't just poor planning, it's a dangerous oversight. So it sets a sort of a dangerous precedent that compromises both the community safety and the integrity of the planning process. And I feel that Brega, classified as Street D with 1,000 desirable capacity, maximum capacity per day. This capacity also assumes typical conditions as per traffic expert Kamal. So this assumes without the additional pressure of being adjacent to 2 major schools. The reality is very different. So we're talking about children, many of whom are unaware of risks that adults can easily identify. And they will be exposed to this increased traffic, and this capacity assumes also pedestrians using the footpath. But the real world scenario is that students walking without using the footpath. That is the actual real world reality. So we have to apply common sense and look beyond what the rules have set. And I think another, like the proposed community benefit, I think in my personal opinion is only 1%, which I can see calculate about $500,000 worth, which is the office building. And I don't really personally consider the 1.67 million exemplary design as it's not even recognized in the state planning framework. But I think the question is, who really benefits from this 3.9 million? And that is the residents. I feel that, sorry, the developers and the residents buying the property. So I feel that traffic from this development also, just to summarize, currently is 155 vehicle movements per day. So as discussed from the traffic expert, it's going to double or more than double. So yeah, you're changing pretty much, or you're transforming what's currently a fairly quiet residential cul-de-sac into a high traffic route almost. So common sense, again, it's really not benefiting the people who initially bought the place in very good place. And I understand there is a need for more housing, but having the road interface at Braga is not the right way forward. So yeah, I just think that we shouldn't set a precedent for other developers to follow in the area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barber, you wish to speak?
Yes, just my colleague was very good, but just to reiterate, I feel that the developers in this instance are pushing the boundary. Firstly, the Centre Group mentioned that they are into retail, and I believe they're going to put retail on the actual site of the Burragoon Centre thing. So they're pushing the boundary, stretching it outside onto the suburban streets. The height, bulk, scale and setbacks are against our local planning rules, and we need to take that into account. The 5-storey parapet wall is signifying that there'll be increased development along Almondbury Road and in that precinct. The community benefits are not commensurate to what they're asking for, the extra 3 or 4 stories. The sliding doors, balcony plants, treed front yard are all benefits to the residents, the developers. The office building is a worry. The City of Melville didn't want to tenant it. Who's going to clean it? Who's going to maintain it? That's going to be a white elephant that'll just be absorbed by the residents. There's no community benefits of standing. And finally, as the residents have highlighted, the traffic impact, the safety of pedestrians, particularly school students, the potential of that laneway becoming even greater with the increased development and more cars onto Braygore Street is a concern for these residents. And so for these reasons, I am voting for the motion.
Thank you. Other panel members wish to speak for or against the motion? Dale?
Thank you, presiding member. Look, in reviewing the plans and reading all the documentation provided to this panel and listening today, it appears to me there are a few critical issues to contemplate: building height, the bulk and scale of the western boundary walls, and the impact on residents of Braygore Place, primarily increased traffic and potential for conflict with pedestrians. So that is what I have focused on in arriving at my position. I've read all the information provided about community benefit to justify the extra height, but I'm actually going to put that to one side for the minute. And I'm going to speak from my perspective about the planning merits, ignoring community benefit, about whether additional height could and should be supported or not. So the height provisions for this site are set out in a structure plan adopted by council as a local planning policy. The structure plan sets out the city's development vision for the area, but its individual provisions are not set in stone. Just because a proposal doesn't align with certain specific provisions of a structure plan doesn't mean it's not supportable or worthy of approval. Structure plans and policies are intended to guide us and any other planning decision maker in their decisions. They're to be given due regard as one component of making a well-rounded planning decision on any proposal. And I think it's worth noting, it'd be interesting if there were statistics available, but many, if not most significant planning proposals do require the exercise of discretion by the decision maker to determine whether the proposal meets the objectives of the planning framework, what the planning framework is trying to achieve for that site, even if it doesn't tick all the specific boxes. Those specific boxes are provided to assist decision makers in determining whether the objectives have been received. But just because those boxes aren't ticked doesn't mean it hasn't. That's where we as professional decision makers start to apply our discretion in determining whether that's the case. The issue of height is often a tricky one. It comes up periodically and for different reasons. Sometimes height is an issue because the extra height causes excessive overshadowing of adjoining properties. But that's not the case with this proposal, given the shadow as determined by the codes at Midwinter falls within the subject lot itself or over the road to the south and not on adjoining properties. Sometimes height is raised as an issue because the extra height results in loss of privacy for neighbours, but that's also not the case with this proposal because it does achieve the required privacy setbacks. Sometimes height is raised as an issue because it represents over-intensification of a site, and that has impacts on traffic generation and the ability of the surrounding road network to cope. But again, that I don't feel is the case with this proposal. Sometimes height is raised because the proposal doesn't comply with the guidance on height or the height provisions set out in the planning framework. Its non-compliance becomes the issue rather than actually any actual impact that additional height may have. In the case of this proposal, I think the applicant has taken on board the advice of the city staff through the assessment process and the design review panel, and the height has been located on the site to minimise impact on adjoining residents and the surrounding area and to reduce the impact of bulk. So on the issue of height, in my view, the extra height itself doesn't cause undue amenity impact to neighbours or the surrounding area. The property most impacted by it is the one to the west, and this owner has stated no objection to the proposal. In terms of the bulk and scale of the western boundary walls, I acknowledge this does have quite significant impact on that western neighbour, but it seems likely there are development intentions for this property that will take into account those boundary walls in the design of their proposal. I don't see how these boundary walls have direct impact on any other property or neighbour. I can understand they will present as quite imposing as viewed from the street until the neighbouring property is developed. But that kind of impact is also not uncommon in an area undergoing transition in density and intensity. And I don't feel that those walls in themselves are enough reason to warrant refusal of what is otherwise a well-designed proposal. In terms of the impact of the residents of Braggle Place, I don't think the height itself has direct impact. I think the building does have good separation distance from the closest property to the east, and it is separated from the rear neighbours by the group dwelling component of the development, which I do think acts as a good transition between the apartments and surrounding R40 area. There will be cars using Braggle Street that don't use it now, and the look and feel of Braggle Place will change over time. It won't only be because of this development, it'll be because of the underlying state and local planning framework that applies to it, that favours access of Braggle Place over access of Almondbury Road. And we've heard from the technical experts as to why, even if we were to shift our view on that, it actually becomes problematic because of queuing distances and distances from roundabouts and so on. So my view is even if the building were designed at the height set out in the structure plan, there would still be additional vehicles using Braggle Place, and that's why I asked the question earlier, do you have an estimate about how many? The traffic impact assessment and the supplementary information submitted by the applicant and the responsible authority report talks about that being considered acceptable by the City of Melville, have concluded that the actual impact of the additional vehicle movements as a result of this development will not be significant. And I do pick up on the points that were made earlier, the questions made earlier. There are other issues that play in Braggle Place that are contributing to the issue that actually not the fault of this development, and the city is going to have to look as this whole area intensify, as other people in Braggle Place start redeveloping their properties to manage those issues on Braggle Place. I think that is separate to this planning approval. I do note the photographs of students using Braggle Place to get to the shopping centre and the concerns expressed by residents about their safety, and I will never downplay or dismiss real safety issues, but I don't think we could refuse this proposal based on potential pedestrian vehicle conflict when there is a dedicated footpath on the eastern side of Braggle Place, which if used for the purposes it was built, will minimise conflict between pedestrians and cars turning into the driveway of this development, which is on the opposite side of the road. And even with a new footpath developed, that footpath may create some conflict, but it'll just create extra space for pedestrians to move. And finally, I note there have been quite a few submissions received, and it's clear from certain submissions and from talking to people today how strongly some residents feel about this proposal. So I feel I need to clarify that in forming a view on this proposal, I've not ignored or dismissed the residents' views. I have reviewed them. I've given them serious consideration, but I've also had to consider the planning and design merits of the proposal in the context of the state and local planning framework that applies to the site. We are bound to look at those things. And on balance, I can't bring myself to agree to a refusal of an application like this one for the reasons mentioned in the report or identified in the submissions received. So I won't be supporting this application.
Thank you. Francesca, to speak to the item?
Yes, I do. I will speak to the proposed grounds for refusal. Having listened to what's been said today, read all the material before us, including all of the submissions, I do not support a refusal of this proposal. The discussion around building height, whilst I'm not going to repeat all of the comments that have already been said, there's been a substantial amount of discussion regarding building height in today's discussion that was further extrapolated out to look at the impacts in both streets, Almonbury Road and Bregor. And from my perspective, and given comments that have also been said, the interface between this site and the adjoining shopping centre opposite a development of this scale is appropriate in that context, and it's a positive contribution to the street from that perspective. In terms of Bregor Place, whilst I acknowledge there is a building form that sits on those lots that face Almonbury Road, the inclusion of a lower density three-group dwelling at low level of two-storey provides a significant and appropriate and positive interface along Bregor Street from my perspective. The transition and the design created to focus height at tapering the building down towards Bregor is an appropriate design, and therefore in terms of ground one I don't support it. In terms of the setbacks, I equally have similar reasoning as ground point 2, but I would increase that or add to that in relation to the impact of those variations, and so those have been considered. The report has addressed those, particularly in areas of overshadowing, overlooking. Those are acceptable, noting that the adjoining property at number 15 Almonbury Road has provided comment, raising no objection to that, as well as the RA indicating the extent of the consequence or the impacts of that. So from my perspective, the side and rear setbacks are appropriate. I've already indicated that the built form, from my perspective, responds to the character. That character does include both low-level development on Bregor as well as the use of Almonbury Road in terms of traffic movement, as well as the shopping centre itself. So in terms of built form, I think the proposal does a very good job, an exceptional job in trying to balance the two interfaces that it has and the different context of those particular streetscapes. Those are my comments in relation to the recommendation on the table, and should we move to another, I'll provide further commentary, as I will make one last point, which is in relation to the traffic. And a lot has been discussed in relation to traffic, and it is very clear from the material that's been provided that the development itself, whilst triggering a movement of traffic, doesn't trigger a movement of traffic and a volume of traffic that is in conflict with either road classification and or functionality and use of road. I also note that it's been clearly identified today that there are peak periods of intensive use by particularly students, those leaving school, principally around the school period, and noting that the information we have before us and confirmed in our presentations today was that the evening peak, predominantly for the residential movement, sits slightly beyond that period, moving from around the 4 to 5 rather than the 3 to 4 predominant period. There is an obligation on all parties in relation to the movement in the road, and I don't see that traffic in this particular instance is so significant to warrant a refusal of this proposal.
Thank you. Well, I've listened to the presentations made. I've read the commentary in the submissions and also the responsible authority report and propose the proposal as submitted by the proponents. I acknowledge that there's been a lot of work done on the application as it's been progressing in the past months. And I think that the council and proponents should be commended for trying to achieve an acceptable outcome. I too support the proposal. I think the issues that have been raised in terms of the structure plan and its requirements for guiding building form, whilst are prescriptive in terms of building height and setbacks, doesn't really address issues of design excellence, probably because when it was formed, and it's not just that it's 10 years old, but it goes beyond the 10 years because it took years to develop as well. So it's greater than 10 years old. But it does not take into account the Design WA, the change to the residential planning codes and other planning instruments and planning and development issues that have developed in the last 10 years, one of them being the desire to increase densities throughout the metropolitan area to share the load of increased densities as well. And the proponents have put forward, and the council acknowledges that the achievement of some of the yields in and around the Melville city centre are going slow and not being achieved. That doesn't necessarily mean that we approve just because we need to get the numbers up, but it also relates to the fact that the yardstick needs to be looked at when looking at these developments. In terms of the design of the development, I note that by acquiring an additional site adjacent to the properties fronting Almondbury Road, the proponents have invested in overcoming one of the issues, and that is the interface between the existing dwelling in Almondbury Road and also setting back the bulk of the building. In terms of the bulk of the building, as viewed from a distance, the building, if it was stepped back a bit further but retained the same height, would still have the same appearance in terms of bulk because of the absence of setbacks to the side boundaries and also Almondbury Road. The issue of the design, I mean, planning authorities do rely on design review panels. They have, every local authority has them. Every local authority is quick to refuse applications if they're poor design, but if they are exemplary design, then I think we should take note of that in terms of our decision making. And in this case, there is a comment from the design review panel that it is an exemplary design. The side setbacks to Bregor and Almondbury, the setbacks there I don't have an issue with. In terms of the western setback, I do note that there will be a large blank wall. I encourage some appropriate artwork on that in an interim period, but I think that given the framework developing along Almondbury Road, there will be development occurring that will mitigate that blank wall. In terms of the traffic issue, I think an adherence to the city centre structure plan to take access away from Almondbury Road has created an issue with the residents in Bregor Place. In terms of the numbers, it's a very low base that Braygall Place presents. It's if it's 140 or even 200 vehicles a day, an extra 200 vehicles a day spread out over a 24 period is rather low. It's not like all those vehicles are going to be driving up and down the street day in, day out. So from that point of view, I think that that is not likely to present as a big issue. I think the issue is going to come in place when the council is faced with 2 or 3 adjoining properties taking access onto Braygall Place. And that's an issue that the council, through its adherence to the structure plan, has to face. In terms of the safety issue, well, that's there now. There's no doubt about that. The fact that students are using that, it's a convenient walkway. Everybody would use it if they were at Applecross High and they wanted to get to the Burragoon Shopping Centre. So, sorry, Garden City, I should say. I think that's what it's still called. There are means by which the council can take some steps to mitigate that, and that is to put signs up, whether people read them or not, but saying pedestrians use footpaths, and there'll be a new one provided. Maybe there need to be some monitors to help the students stick to that, and a little bit of an education program. But I don't see that as a huge issue from the additional traffic from this development. So all in all, in terms of the community benefits, there's no measurable yardstick that we can use as decision makers. There's no magical formula. There's a few being kicked around, and I hopefully in due course decision makers can turn around and say, well, that element and that element is worth so many dollars, so therefore you've got to pay for it. But in this case, I think that the condition that requires community benefit contribution is, in my view, appropriate, and I will be supporting the proposal. That being the case, debate. Sorry? Yes, I'm going to say that the mover now has a right of reply on that. Councillor Lim, do you wish to summarise or reply to all of that?
Thank you, Presiding Member. Yes, I think just a short one. So structure plans are created through public consultations and careful strategic vision. So they're not, to me, suggestions or a guide to be disregarded. So when you do so, it undermines the very vision that the city is striving to achieve. And also around the height, like minimizing it, it's not the excessive height. Minimizing is not the same as eliminating. So like in this instance, the excessive height is visually intrusive, and the presence alone affects the character of the area. And this is not talking about traffic or whatever other implications that comes of it. And also you acknowledge that there is a safety concern already existing in the area. So this proposal, as we all know, as we all heard today, will make it worse. Installing a sign, it's a solution, but not a real solution. We're still coming back to talking about children. They are not adults who likely don't respond to signs the way we adults do. So we need to design for their safety, not hope they behave like a grown-up would. So that's my wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's the completion of debate on the item. We now have before us for vote a responsible authority recommendation for refusal with reasons. Can I have a vote on those in favour? That's 2 against. That's 3. From the taker, it's that item is defeated. Now, we do have before us an alternate recommendation And in order that we can review that and discuss it, I have a mover and second it for the alternative recommendation. Dale Page, mover, seconder, Francesca Lafante. Dale, would you like to speak to the item, please?
Briefly, because I think I've already said a lot. Look, I think for a development that is higher density, it's a good location for it. Close to public transport, freeway, cycle route services. So in a bigger picture sense, it's actually a good spot for higher density development. And the applicant made changes to the design to reduce height and floor space and to step the building back and soften its presentation and interface. When I look at the changes that were made, of the view they weren't tokenistic, because sometimes these changes can be tokenistic. In this case, I feel they were quite impactful. The design is of a very high quality, and again, the city's design review panel not only supports the design, but has advised it represents an exemplary design outcome. And again, that's an achievement, because it doesn't often happen that developments like this will get that tick of approval from a design review panel. I think all in all, the proposal responds well to the requirements of the structure plan, apart from the height and the boundary walls, and we've covered that off in terms of the specific location and circumstances of this site. And I feel that the main impacts are going to be borne by the landowner to the west, and those boundary walls, as I said, are a normal part of transitioning an area to higher density. So I feel the conditions provided by the city in response to the Reg 13 request are comprehensive and appropriate for a development such as this one. So I'm happy to support the alternate Reg 4 approval subject to those conditions.
Thank you. Francesca, seconder, would you like to speak?
Thank you. From my perspective, having considered all the material, I've already made some comments, support the proposal. From my perspective, it is consistent with, in many elements, with the Melville City Centre structure plan. I note that there is a due regard document, a policy document, and I've given significant consideration to that. From my perspective, the scheme, LPS 6, has specific provisions that talk about the exercise discretion, which is clause 34, and I'm satisfied that in this particular instance, discretion is appropriate in supporting the building height. The exercise of discretion is warranted. The building height is focused towards Almondbury Street. I've already spoken about that. In its locational context, Almondbury Street is dominated on one side of the road by the shopping centre. That is a significant development on that side, with development intensification to occur in the future. It is appropriate. It is the most appropriate location for high density and height, being directly opposite a shopping centre which has heavy traffic movement, as well as very close to the roundabout and the entrance to the site. The design is an exceptional design from my perspective, both in terms of its form and scale, as well as in its materiality and the architectural elements. It is a positive component to this development, and quite unique in terms of the plans and documents that I see, that the development has got two distinctive components to it, being a multiple dwelling component focused with its height towards Almondbury Street, with no street interruption, therefore creating a positive street interface with the shopping centre, graduating down and incorporating quite specifically two group dwellings via a central driveway. From my perspective, that is a very positive design component and design transition, respecting intent, giving a significant respect to Bragal Place, and citing the most intensive development components towards the shopping centre. From my perspective, that is an excellent design outcome, as already indicated, both in its configuration as well as the design treatments. In terms of traffic and pedestrian safety, as well as location of crossover, I accept that the location of this crossover is appropriate in the context of this. I'm also agree with the applicant or disagree with the intention or the suggestion that Almonbury Street should be the access point for it. In this particular instance, given its location, I think the proposal is appropriate to come off the side street as is designed. I also acknowledge that the road classification does provide for intensification of traffic volume in that street. I'm satisfied that the applicant and the design is appropriate in the context of what the applicant and the proposal can ultimately do in relation to many of the concerns that were raised around traffic and pedestrian safety. The applicant's suggestion to offer the inclusion of an additional pathway is a significant contribution to addressing pedestrian safety, the contribution that takes it not just in front of the applicant's own site, but extends it right down the street is, I consider, a significant contribution to addressing pedestrian safety, particularly as the generation of that does not sit in the responsibility of the applicant. And so from my perspective, I think it's a benefit for the area. And I acknowledge that students may not necessarily have the same adult does, but I also acknowledge that the inclusion of an additional pathway does provide a substantial improvement to the area. I've already indicated that the movement provided to us today, clarified in the presentations and in the discussion, that periods of student movement, there are peak periods of parent parking, and in the morning there is a crossover in the morning between both development and the students. In the afternoon there's a separation which does improve safety. From my perspective, and I again repeat this issue, those are challenges in the area. Those challenges are borne by people that are more than the development itself. They are both local government, school itself and others. And from my perspective, this development in terms of its siting of its location of crossover, the design that's been provided is appropriate in that context. The RA has an extensive RA, and thank you to the officers. It was very helpful from my perspective and very detailed. The tables that addressed all of the issues were very clear and concise. Indicated that a number of the design elements were acceptable, noted that in terms of the overall proposal, amenity matters, which are generally the matters that any form and scale, such as privacy, overlooking, overshadowing, have been addressed appropriately in this design. And I think that is the skill of this design we have in front of us in terms of how it is orientated to street and how it's incorporated group dwelling development to create that separation and minimise amenity impacts. I accept that there will be a change in the street for the existing residents, but that change is predicated by a framework that does support intensification of development in that area. And so from my perspective, overall, this development is appropriate, both in terms of the framework and in terms of its locational context, and I'm supportive of it. Sorry, I do want to make some changes. Sorry. I do wish to move an amendment.
Okay, yes.
I wish to move an amendment. My first amendment is Amendment 1 for the minute taker. Amendment 1 is delete condition 1. That is the reference to the MRS. It is not required as there's been a change of legislation. If there is a seconder, that is my Amendment 1.
Seconder, Dale Page.
I don't have any other comments to make. Reasoning for that amendment.
Okay, does anyone wish to speak against that amendment for condition 1 to delete it? If not, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you.
I have amendment 2 that I wish to make. My amendment 2 is condition 32. I know there's been a lot of conversation in relation to communal facilities. There's been conversation in relation to the framework, and my amendment is to modify condition 32 as follows. That the condition is the provision of the construction of a footpath, the provision of a footpath between Almonbury Street and Leveridgeburg Street that is condition 32. It's being specific, and the reason is to be specific and provide clarity as to what is required from the applicant as part of this development.
So could you read that out again, please?
It's the works to be provided by the applicant outside of the property, which is the construction of the footpath between Almondbury Road and Leverberg Street. Thank you, Leverberg Street.
So that's deletion of condition 32.
Oh, it's actually modify condition 32. Delete what it currently says and replace it with what I've just said.
Okay, so that's the replacing the entirety of that.
Of condition 32, and at the same time it will be, sorry if I can clarify that, delete advice note 6. No longer be relevant.
Okay, so
So it's modify condition 32.
So when you say modify, sorry, just so I can get it clear, where do you want to modify it from?
Replacing it, aren't I?
Yes,
So
yes.
replacing
So you're deleting current condition 32 and replacing it with the words.
and replace it with the words yes.
Yes, you have the wording. Take it.
So condition 32, which currently reads subject to the other conditions of this approval of community benefit items.
Yes. So it would be delete that and advice note 6.
Right, note 6, and include the words. Just read them out again for us so that we're clear.
So Francesca, if you could just repeat.
So the new condition is that the provision of the following facilities or the following infrastructure: construction of footpath between Almondbury Road and Leverberg Street to the satisfaction of the city. Ultimately, it could be or is either to construct or provide funding for, which is the intention.
Yes, it's either.
So it could be construction of a footpath between Almondbury Road and Leverberg Street, or the provision of funding
For the construction of that footpath.
to the satisfaction of the city.
Okay, clear on the wording. That's moved. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded, but nothing to add.
Dale, you want to add something to it? No. Okay, nothing to add. Anyone against that? Yes, councillor, you wish to speak against it?
To speak against it, I had trouble getting my, I think it's not good to delete the whole section 6. So you're saying that no other community benefits? Are you just going to give them the footpath? Is it the only community benefit they provide?
That's what I'm moving at this stage.
Yes, I'll definitely speak against that.
Go ahead.
I'll speak against that. There's other advice there that if you've given them these height benefits, setback benefits, then I think that appropriate community benefits should be provided. And therefore, I'm speaking against the deletion of section 6. I was going to cut it in terms of what else the development is going to achieve.
The community benefits stipulated aren't a condition.
Aren't a condition.
So that was advice note 5. But that condition's gone. So did you say condition of advice note 6 be deleted? Okay. Okay.
So just with that, Jean, I think perhaps the original Waiting for conditions. Should have read advice note 6.
Yes, I thought so, yes. Okay, that was causing a bit of confusion. Anyone else wish to speak against the item?
I'll probably say I'll just align with Councillor Barber. I wouldn't change anything with the current conditions. I think it's already set that the footpath will be constructed. So I think I wouldn't want to add any additional complexity to the current process. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'll speak against the amendment. I don't see anywhere at this stage where there's an ability for the financial contribution to be paid to the city, which includes the footpath. I think the 257,000.
Yes, the wording was that they have to either build it or provide the money to the city.
Yes, well, if we take the condition away and the footnote, then there's no reference to it.
Replacing it.
Pardon?
You're replacing it with the alternate 32.
Well, that's true, yes. Well, I'll withdraw that objection. I'll support the amendment as well. So all those, you would like to reply?
Yes, I'd like one. From my perspective, to clarify, the discussion, we had a lot of discussion about the requirement of community facilities. It's been clearly articulated that there is limitations within the framework, the structure plan, and there are some provisions in the R codes that deal with community facilities. A number of those community facilities are already built, or those community considerations are already built into the design that we have before us, and they have been taken into consideration. Therefore, I don't see the need to incorporate them as a specific provision, because the conditions do say the applicant needs to comply with design and the plans that are submitted. So they are a given within it. In terms of the contribution from the applicant, they have already indicated, despite that the city does not require it, that they are going to provide and have a format to manage the business centre, which will provide for public to access and use it. Therefore, I don't believe there needs to be a provision written into that. The city has provided clarity in terms of what they expect. I disagree that the contribution, financial contributions as written, should be over and above, in addition, paid by the applicant. And I say that in the context of the comments I've already indicated, that a significant issue raised by the community was around pedestrian and student safety in that area. From my perspective, the offer that's included in the discussion today and as part of the documentation to put in an additional pathway that goes from the development site all the way down the street is a significant contribution to safety in an area that goes beyond the generation of the proposal. And so from my perspective, that is why I have moved this amendment, deleting condition 32 and advice note 6 and replacing it with the wording that I've given, because I think that is a very significant contribution to broader benefit in that area.
Thank you. Okay, that's been a cessation of debate on the item. I'll put the amendment as proposed. All those in favour? 3 against? 2. Thank you.
I have a third amendment, and it is to delete condition 33. My reasoning for deleting condition 33 is that the applicant has indicated the measures they are going to go in relation to creating the access, and it does not need to be secured by the access leg. The community facilities doesn't need to be secured by a deed, in my view. The provision, as clearly articulated in the amendment that's just been carried, is quite specific about the pathway, and there is no need, from my perspective, to include any other obligation by way of deeds.
Seconder?
Just clarify, are we only dealing with 33 then, or associated 34 and 35?
I was only dealing with 33, but
34 and 35.
I can go back to that. Let me just go back to that.
Because it 34 and 35 reference of the deed and advice note 5, which I think was advice note 6. Sure.
I think I'm comfortable to delete. Let me just say. The only element would be in relation to the from my perspective, the business centre, but as a city does not request for it to be provided, and I'm not including any others. So this could be, yes, deletion of 33, 34. I'm comfortable with them. So for the minute taker, it's deletion of 33, 34 and 35, if there is a second one.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Yes, Dale Page is seconding it. Yes. You can speak to the item again if you wish.
No, I think I've made enough comment.
Okay, Dale, you wish to speak to the item? Objection to it? Anyone objecting to it?
Yes, I'll object. I'll object to it, but I just don't think we should be altering the.
Okay. Councillor Lim, comment?
I agree with Councillor Barber as well. Yeah, it's just at this stage we shouldn't be, deleting, so many conditions when a plan has already been discussed, and we've gone through various different deputations, and it's just at this stage I haven't had the reasonable amount of time to actually consider the deletion of these conditions. Thank you.
Okay, look, I'll speak in favour of it. Condition 33 talks about provision, ongoing maintenance of community benefits, which primarily I think talk about the business centre and the need for a management statement, the deed to cover these issues, which are in part of the Strata Title Act for the business centre. And because that's no longer being considered as a council element, then I don't think they are required as a community benefit. So I'll be supporting that. To reply, we'll close debate. I'll put the amendment to delete conditions 33, 34 and 35. All those in favour? 3 against, 2. Thank you.
No more comments.
No more comment. Do you wish to speak further? No. Okay. I think I'll just make a couple of comments on the amended recommendation, and that is that I reiterate my comments on the design, the traffic issues. Whilst I wasn't trying to minimise the seriousness of the traffic issue, the traffic safety, I think that there will need to be some issues or some steps taken to minimise the impact of existing traffic and future traffic, which I think will not be that great, given that the morning peak is minor and the evening peak doesn't coincide with students. I think that students probably have a better rate of following signage than adults, my experience. So I think that all in all, the framework that's pertaining to the site, we've investigated that and discussed it and provided rationale for support. So I'll support the alternate recommendation as amended. I wish to speak against Councillor Lim.
Thank you, Presiding Member. So I wouldn't speak too much about the alternate recommendation because I believe it's already been spoken. But in summary, I think approving the devil's in the detail. So once you break it down, the proposal offers genuinely only 1% community benefit, so 500K compared to the 38.6 million. Approving it undermines the long-term vision of the city. It also defies common sense. It presents a serious safety risk for children in Applecross and Ardross. It's based on what I believe a flawed assumption that they will navigate traffic light adults. The development will transform the character of the quiet residential street into a fairly high traffic zone for its area, more than doubling the current volumes, and with an oversized, visually intrusive structure on community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barber used to speak against the item.
Yeah, I'm just disappointed that the conditions about community benefits have been taken out, having overridden the City of Melville's decision to then take away the community benefits, I think is just a double slap in the face, and I'm pretty disappointed.
Thank you. Francesca, you wish to close debate on the item? Rod, you've spoken.
I'd look just to close debate on the issue. Just to clarify, I'm not of the view that the amendment to remove those community benefit conditions has removed the community benefits. I think some of those community benefits, as Francesca pointed out, have built into the development, and there's conditions that says this development has to be built in accordance with the plan. So they're already captured. So we've not lost them. The only thing that wasn't captured, Francesca put in as an amended condition to make it very clear what was required. So I was comfortable to go with that. I don't feel we've lost the community benefit, even though structure plan doesn't actually require community benefits for this site as a trade-off for height. I don't feel we've lost it. We've just sharpened the wording so that it's not confusing in future. I think that's what we've done, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. You wish to close vote?
It was me. I just did.
Oh, you? Oh, sorry. Because you moved.
I did.
Sorry. Okay. All right. Then I'll put the amended recommendation, alternate recommendation. All in favour? 3 against. 2. Thank you very much. Okay, getting back to the agenda. 4 on the agenda is Form 2 DAP application, 0 none. Item 5, Section 31 SAT reconsideration, 0 none. That being the case, I will close the meeting at 1:06 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for participating.
Thank you all.